Well, January ad revenue's here, so welcome to my new crib. Granted, it probably looks a bit more bougie in here than you probably expected. I actually came into 2026 thinking, new year, new me. Maybe I'll even get off my fat arse and pitch a proper tent for this bit. Then I thought, actually, I couldn't give a fuck. That's rude. Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to the Comedy Review, the show that's as prepared as the Atlassian Williams Formula 1 team. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport. Things like this. Charles Leclerc steps in shit. This guy wanks off McLaren's new F1 car. And Kelly Piquet admits to spawn camping. No, seriously, what the f*** is this? Thankfully, Formula 1 was back to finally give us something to talk about again. Only, there's a bit of a problem with that. You see, after an exhilarating week of waiting half an hour every day to see a paint job no different than the year before, and don't worry, I'll be covering all that in next week's episode once we can complete the set, Formula 1 was set to head back to Barcelona, Catalunya for the first pre-season test of 2026, and an opportunity to find out which mechanics would be served with a side of P45 at the end of the month. Issue was, Formula 1 was so confident about the new regulations coming into this year, they've opened up said test to, well, no one. The 5-day event would instead be held behind closed doors, with police, security and helicopters patrolling the grounds to prevent anyone from getting a peek at the team's new machinery. And when we all started to complain, they just decided they'd scrap coverage of the second test in Bahrain as well. What we were left with was carefully edited highlights packages depicting a fairy tale land where everything has gone perfectly. Isaac Hadjar definitely hasn't turned the rear of his new Red Bull into a piece of modern art. So I've taken it upon myself to piece together what actually happened and deliver it to you guys, because let's be honest, Formula 1 can't hate me any more than they already do. So we start on day 1. Day 1 of testing serves as a cruel reminder that it may be a new year, it may be a fresh start, but Formula 1 officials are still as big a as usual. Not even accredited media were allowed into the paddock to cover this test. The race, spotted here dressing up as Asbos and attempting the challenge of making Ed Straw look as inconspicuous as possible. I'm gonna catch strays for that one, aren't I? Getting to the on-track action, the Monday's running will begin with a battle between German automotive powerhouses Audi and Mercedes, both vying to be the first car out on track, and probably the only battle these two will be able to engage in all year. Audi may have been the first team to break cover in Barcelona earlier this month, but this time it was the Silver Arrows giving them the middle finger, as Kimi Antonelli and the Mercedes snuck out just as we got to 9 in the morning. There would be 2 of 7 teams opting to run on the first day. It's probably worth knowing here that constructors are only permitted to clock laps on 3 of the 5 this week. The other Monday competitors being Haas, VCarb, Red Bull, Shit, and newcomers Cadillac, whose car looked about as basic as a funeral director's mood board. Not everyone would be there, however, notably Aston Martin, who was still yet to get their car out of its box yet, and Williams, who actually, I don't know what they were playing at. The Grove-based squad was announced earlier in the week that they were behind schedule with their 2026 build and thus planned to avoid the test entirely. I covered that in more detail in this video, just in case you fancy sticking around and fancy me save up for a new piss bowl for my off-season tent. Since then, we actually have an update, courtesy of James Vowles in this reconstruction of an ISIS hostage video where he tells us, well, basically nothing we don't already know. Maybe you should turn the camera off, James, and instead try to focus on unfucking your car a little more. A few thousand miles away, Mercedes were rocking up a frightening number of laps on day 1 of testing. They were pipped to the top of the times by Isaac Hadjar and his Red Bull. And if you watched F1's official summary of the day, then that was all she wrote. There was no drama, no reliability, certainly not 3 red flags. Oh, don't tell me it's back again. Right, that's the only one you're getting or will be here forever. The first stoppage of the new season came the way of Alpine and their Argentine driver, Franco Colapinto, who actually didn't punt it into the barriers, mainly because he never really got the chance. The French outfit's new Mercedes power unit going up in smoke early into the morning's running. Still, could be worse. You could be Audi, who according to F1's official highlights put, quote, solid running in the morning session. No mention of the afternoon though for some reason. The new outfit managed just 27 laps before Gabriel Bortoleto was spotted getting an upgrade, as the real R26 was forced to cover up like it had just walked out of Saudi Arabian border control. As team principal Jonathan Wheatley was interviewed at what appears to be gunpoint, the final stoppage of the day would come courtesy of Liam Lawson, whose Red Bull went into anti-stall coming out of the pit lane. Sorry, VCarb, I still live in a world where he has a successful future in Formula 1. Tuesday was supposed to bring the arrival of championship defenders McLaren, only then it pissed it down, scaring the papaya team off in fear that either Lando Norris or Oscar Piastri would trade in their January bottle count in the slippery conditions. The Ferrari would spawn in, however, the team kind enough to release this special footage, even capturing the rare moment of Lewis Hamilton looking happy for once, probably because he wasn't driving in the morning. He was more of his forlorn self, having had a chance to get behind the wheel in the afternoon, though at least the Scuderia were able to break the 100-lap mark. Red Bull weren't quite so lucky. Verstappen reportedly going for a beach holiday on just his first lap of the day, though the team escaped the wrath of the F1 cameras, considering they seem to magically switch off when something bad seems to happen. Isaac Hadjar wasn't so lucky. The French went out in the afternoon and having a small off that didn't affect his session. Sorry, that was F1's interpretation. Here's what that small off actually looked like. What made this 2019 Gasly tribute so much worse was that Hadjar managed to go off at the one corner that the patient bystanders actually had a good glimpse of. In the end, the wet weather left just 4 times on the board at the end of the day, Red Bull saving some face with the fastest time once again. That said, their only competition was Ferrari, so don't get excited just yet. Wednesday would finally give us the long-awaited reveal of McLaren's 2026 challenger, sporting a special testing livery that over on my podcast Talk Shift I called out this week. I'd like to amend my statement now and say I'm actually quite a fan, and when we recorded this on Tuesday I was merely identifying as f***ing blind. This would also mark the debut of Lando Norris running the number 1 on his car, a fact he rather struggled to contain his excitement about, mainly because this is now a much better representation of the average brain cells held by his entire community. The Briton would log 76 laps across the day, clocking in the 3rd fastest time on a leaderboard we seem to care less and less about with every day, partially because it's testing and partially because Mercedes are running away with it. The Silver Arrows locked out the front 2 spots on day 3, Antonelli pipping Russell by a couple of tenths, the pair almost a full second clear of the McLaren behind, just in case you thought we had a championship battle going on in 2026. With Red Bull still trying to complete their new French-designed jigsaw puzzle, that meant matters were set to be a little less exciting on Wednesday. Thankfully, Audi thought they'd fixed all their problems, which as it turned out morphed into their bid to host the 2026 comedy review. Hulk was in the driving seat this time, the R26 managing just 5 laps before it threw yet another hissy fit. Rumour has it, this was the fastest it managed to go all day. Further red flags would come from Oliver Behrman, whoever had the displeasure of driving that V-carb in a day that was so exciting the F1 fandom were far more enticed tracking the Aston Martin's progress over on flight radar. And speaking of... F1 fans truly know no bounds. Their inventive tactics to get eyes on 2026 testing, getting to the point where this guy rinsed out a whole f***ing Cessna and flew over the Barcelona circuit, as FOM officials made arrangements for anti-aircraft measures ahead of the final set of running on Friday. Actually, why don't we just run all the testing in Saudi Arabia? Then we get all that for free. This was a big day, however. Aston Martin finally scheduled to hit the track, only morning rolled around and they still weren't ready yet. Finally breaking cover in the afternoon as the F1 world marvelled over what Aero Jesus had just cooked up in his Stroll-sponsored crackdown. Everyone was eager to get more shots of the most dramatic-looking 2026 car yet, only that became rather easy once it ground to a halt just 4 laps after exiting the pit lane. I wonder how the F1 channel's going to spin this. But they're just going to cut to Mike Crack, it seems. The Aston-Honda collaboration had somehow managed to have an even worse opening day compared to the McLaren one in 2015. And on the subject of dream partnerships that end in PTSD, Lewis Hamilton was back out for Ferrari, and soon spotted taking a lovely pirouette in sight of the to-be-dominant team he just left behind. Enjoy these pictures, guys, because you're not going to get many more of them. They weren't the only ones running into problems. It was Oscar Piastri's turn in the McLaren, and thus its engine's turn to stop behaving like an engine anymore. A fuel issue sidelining the Australian for a large portion of the day. Caddy were back out as well, with Sergio Perez claiming things had started well. He also said that there were problems, quote, everywhere, but that was cut out of the F1 highlights for some reason. I'll be honest, not a whole lot really happened besides that, so an F1 Twitter being briefly fooled by Gasly's 2019 crash filmed on what appeared to be a f***ing cucumber. I guess we haven't mentioned times yet, though I don't think there's much need at this point. Let's just get to day 5 and round this shit up, shall we? Day 5 then, and well done Aston Martin, you managed more than 4 laps this time. The Silverstone-based squad was still drawing eyes with the design of their 2026 machine, which was running a, quote, limited speed program, which is a creative way of saying you're slow. Red Bull were also on track, having bandaged up the RB22, Max Verstappen behind the wheel this time, with Isaac Hadjar still grounded and on the naughty step. Finding any other updates than that was proving to be a challenge. Security heightened even more for the final day, and I'm presuming any other leakers have been rounded up and shot by this point. maybe by the same person who appeared to be conducting the post-session interviews. What we could ascertain was that the McLaren was looking a little bit more competitive, both Norris and Piastri testing the limits of the MCL40 and lapping in and around the times of George Russell earlier in the week, which would be great if the times didn't mean all. Lewis Hamilton therefore saw this as the perfect opportunity for a glory run, reminding himself what it felt to be on top of the timing tables for once. Other than that, it was a pretty boring day of testing, not even a red flag, which is I guess both a blessing and a curse at the end of the day. I guess then we should try and focus on what we learnt, which isn't a lot, but here are my takeaways at least. Reliability has been a lot better than expected. Plenty of teams were able to set over 100 laps per day, with the exception of Audi and Aston Martin, whose power units appear to be better suited as a form of medieval torture equipment than Formula 1 engines. The theories about Mercedes' domination seem to hold true so far. Not only are they reliable, but both Russell and Antonelli have proven to be quick as well. McLaren seemingly also hot on their heels, meaning we're potentially in for another year of these insolent pricks burning down their gardens on Twitter. We should take that with a huge pinch of salt, however. I mean, how many times have Ferrari rocked up to testing and seemingly dominated, only to pull this sort of shit later in the year? Either way, it's set to be an interesting season. Not sure if I mean that in a positive way yet, but regardless, I'll be covering all the drama right here on the channel, starting with the car launches when we've got them all locked in next week. So if you enjoyed that, hit the subscribe button and join the comedy review ride for 2026. Big thanks to the members and patrons as well. They got this video early and get exclusive content over there too. So head down to the links in the description to find out more. I'll be back soon with something else, but until then, you know what to do. F*** off. Oh look, Kimmy's got a new company car for 2026. No, Kimmy, don't do it. Don't, it's not worth it. Don't. Well, shit.
That's rude.
Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to the Comedy Review, the show hosted today by the one and only Jabba the... Kill yourself. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport. Things like this. Oscar Piastri shows off his Zac Brown Halloween costume. Audi honoured their German heritage with a 1940s death march up some stairs. And Lewis Hamilton's love of animals sees him get a taste of a sea turtle's dinner.
And it's the lowest, it's the lowest grip I've ever felt here in my 20 years, so...
Is that the car or Kim Lewis? I can't quite work it out. Anyway, we've got some launches to cover now, and as per usual, we'll be ranking the liveries as well. So let's start by going back to a month ago, where we had so much hope. Kicking off our 2026 launch season then was Red Bull and VCarb, who held a joint event in downtown Detroit at 1 AM UK time, which made me very happy. To make things worse, their live stream proceeded to be 2 hours later, meaning I was actually up at 3 AM. I had to take a second to process whether this bit actually happened.
Do you want to do a spin too and show us the new
You want to
kit?
see my ass?
All that meant everything was leaked hours before the official broadcast. Even Daniel Ricciardo being bell-tapped didn't escape the wrath of F1 Twitter. Though granted, Red Bull at least kicked matters off with a bang by finally forcing their livery designers to stray a little further than the Control C and V buttons on their keyboards. As someone who grew up watching the Gloss Bull era, this is fit. It's a 10 out of 10 and you can't convince me otherwise. This all actually rather took away from VCarb's turn in the limelight. People so disinterested by this stage, you could hear the crowd talking over their press interviews, even the social media manager getting bored of their shit and leaking the car 20 minutes early. I liked this one a lot last year and thought it was one of the best designs on the grid, and while it's still good in 2026, I do feel like it's a bit of a downgrade. Then you get to the car itself, which kind of just looks like pre-2025 me's gone and sat on it. These images come from the team's traditional pre-season shakedown at Imola, and thanks to VCarb and getting these out to the public so quickly, I do wonder if part of the reason for that was due to the fact that most people's first looks came from this footage, Lindblad taking advantage of Helmut Marko getting the can and going for an additional beach holiday ahead of testing. Next up were Haas, who tend to avoid the flashy event, mainly because the last one involved this living broomstick, and jeans pockets don't usually go that far. Instead, we got our traditional hype video, and I don't think it's too controversial to say this, I now need to do some cleaning up. The inevitable Toyota takeover seemed to get ever closer, with heavy inspiration across the entire car. The only peculiar design choice being to publish it with the front and rear wheels fitted the wrong way round. Haas attempted to fix this by giving their fans a taste of epilepsy with their race suit reveal video, which I presume was playing in the cockpit when Ollie Behrman went on to do this. Audi was a launch I was really excited for in 2026, and they went and f***ed it. Being one of the sport's new-ish teams for the upcoming season, we were all quite excited to see what the German powerhouse's car would look like, Hey, at the end of the day, it can't be worse than this Chernobyl experiment, can it? Only Audi decided to subvert expectations. The easiest way to do so was to make it shit, as it turns out. Our launch opens with your typical babble from some guy in a suit you don't really care about, and it's finally time to see the car. Oh, hang on, no, we're going upstairs, apparently. Hang on, has the producer just fallen asleep as well? That wasn't quite the end of this one, with Audi then giving us a YouTube premiere countdown in the middle of their launch event, subsidising that with a light show and a man with a fetish for microphones. This went on for 10 minutes, by the way.
So I think that it's time to start with something big.
Oh good, looks like it's finally ending.
I think it's time to talk to some of the key members who are shaping this journey.
I'll just show us the fucking car already. After yet more interviews, Audi dropped their first look at the R26, in what would have been a really cool reveal had the producer not fallen asleep again. From this wide shot, it just looks like Hulkenberg had bent down to unzip someone's flies. Then we get to the car itself, which as it turns out was exactly the same as they revealed several months ago. Basically, Audi just scammed us into waiting half an hour for sponsorship placement. Contrary to people's opinions online, I don't actually hate this design, and actually I think it looks a lot better out on track. But the standard's been set pretty high for 2026, so I'm going for a 6 out of 10 on this one. Now, what's next? Mercedes are another team to forego their usual season launch, and one day just drop some random renders of their new car, probably learning from Audi and realising the public wouldn't be too content with sitting through interviews just to find out they've put some silver stripes on the back. It's a solid livery though, in my book a 7 out of 10. Though as it turns out, the Silver Arrows weren't quite finished with us yet. A good week or so later, the team seemingly forgot they'd done their car reveal and held a season launch anyway, which I would tell you about, but like everyone else, I didn't really watch it. It's all been a little hush-hush over there after the team's rival engine manufacturers seem to have ganged up to brand their powertrain illegal under the new rules, because apparently the only one thing more German than Mercedes engines is everyone else forming a literal axis of envoy to declare them verboten. Ferrari have a hell of a lot riding on it this year, and we're ready to launch their car at a special track day shakedown event in Fiorano, which naturally means it leaks several hours beforehand. The glue factory may well have cooked with this car, however, returning to gloss paint for the first time since 2018, and going for a historic look that either harks back to the Niki Lauda days or 2016, but they were completely and utterly shit. On the subject, Leclerc was quick to find some in the Fiorano gravel traps as he greeted the Tifosi and begged one to shoot him in the head. Ferrari's social media wasn't having a much better day, publishing this tweet along with the caption, quote, "Built in the dark, driven in the light." Well, that explains a ton, doesn't it? Well, Red Bull clapped back with their own rendition on Twitter. I think it's about time we rank this livery, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a pretty nice upgrade. 8 out of 10, and I get the feeling like I'm being a bit too positive with these. Oh, don't worry, Alpine's next, that'll get us back on track. Aptly, the Alpine launch ended up being held on a sinking ship. Actually, I think they've missed a trick here. I think it's time to bring back up the Belgrano. Pierre Gasly, Franco Colapinto, and now apparent stroke victim Flavio Briatore had to be helped off stage like old age pensioners, only to reveal a livery that everyone had seen testing around Silverstone several days prior. That took 18 minutes, by the way, which could have gone a little bit quicker had the lead presenter remembered what her lines were. Yeah, that was it. Overall, this is pretty much the exact same livery as last year, with some slight variation on the nose cone, which does help it somewhat. But if you've been a fan of this channel for any length of time, you'll know what I think about a pink livery. It looks fucking stupid, and Colapinto should have driven it off the edge of that ship when he had the chance. And let's see if Williams can do any better. This was always going to be an interesting one, as Williams admitted they were rather behind on their car build and plagued by weight issues ahead of pre-season testing, forcing them to skip the Barcelona shakedown entirely. Don't worry, I'm sure they'll make it to their own launch though. I mean, oh, maybe not then. That at least meant James Vowles was too busy to fill us in on how proud he was of all of his sponsors for 20 minutes, and we just got a digital reveal of the Williams car. The team did decide to go lighter on their paint colour, which I don't think is really going to help their weight problems that much, and quite frankly, I'm a little bit disappointed about this one. With a new logo and identity reveal, this was the opportunity to shake things up with the livery. Instead, we have what seems like the aftermath of an argument over what shade of blue they wanted to use. Granted, having seen it out on track, it does look a little bit better, but I'm still only giving it a 5 out of 10. Now go and castrate me in the comments and increase my engagement figures. We were all left waiting a while for the final 3 liveries of 2026, brand new team Cadillac decided to postpone their launch till the Super Bowl, in the meantime giving us this special livery, which would only race at the Shakedown event, which, let me remind you, no one was allowed to see. I did my best to cover what I could of that though, link is up in one of these corners for you to check out. We've had several teasers of the car in recent weeks, Caddy inviting some YouTubers in to document the entire process, and in the end producing something that looks more like it's come straight out of the Epstein files. In the end, the American giant would go all out on their launch, however, combining the $20 million Super Bowl spot with an event in New York City's Times Square. I mean, what could possibly go wrong with that? Well, quite a lot as it turns out. Firstly, their countdown was wrong for the vast majority on its own official website. Then they decided to hire Michael Bay, who's now proceeding to sue the team for stealing his ideas, which knowing him would have looked a little something like this.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
The actual advert did a rather crap job at showing us the new car, and really that might just be for the best. As for the looks of things, there wasn't enough room left in the budget to finish painting it. Now, I'm not a huge advocate of asymmetrical liveries at the best of times, but let's try and rate both sides. This one, 6 out of 10, and this one can get in the fucking bin. This is another one that admittedly looks marginally better out on track, but just like Williams, I'm just a bit disappointed. I mean, you could have done so much more. Our penultimate team to show off their 2026 colours were McLaren, who opted against a flashy set and stage, probably over fears that technical chief Rob Marshall might try to eat it. The team had already given away that not much was going to change on their new livery, with the testing one showing off the same patterns we'd grown used to over the last few years. At least they didn't take too long to show us that disappointment. I'm just kidding, we had to put up with 20 whole minutes of talking before they revealed the exact same livery as before, by which point most McLaren fans, who seemingly hold the attention span of Michael Schumacher, had already swiped onto their next piece of brain rot. Wait, shit, don't put Rob Marsh on the couch, it can't hold... On the subject of explosions, that would cap this car launch off in a display that almost accidentally sent the entire Middle East into a new conflict and gave Lando the distraction to go down on Zach again before the cameras awkwardly panned back in his direction. I mean, tell me this isn't 2025 papaya rules summed up in one image. Sorry, we were ranking the car launches, weren't we? We've got a bit more orange, and it was a solid look before, but it's time for a bigger refresh in my book. 7 out of 10. Now it's time to move on to Aston Martin. What the hell happened there? Wrapping up car launch season was Aston Martin, who opened with this scene showing everything they've accomplished over the last few years. Well, eventually anyway. This season launch actually kicked off a month or so before, with Honda revealing their brand new engine to the world, rather rare in this day and age, though I guess there was no point in other teams copying given how rubbish it was. That was rather further driven home by how happy these officials looked to all be here, the only one somewhat gleeful being F1 boss Stefano Domenicali, who randomly spawns into these events for the vibe it seems. And the actual Aston Martin launch didn't end up going much better, with the 20 minutes of endless talking being replaced with 20 minutes of technical difficulties, which somehow I actually preferred.
Yeah, a bit nuts. Oh!
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see the car as it improved racing.
What the fuck was that?
One Oxbridge twat on a violin later, when we got a look at the car itself. Now, last year's Aston was one that suffered from the paint-stripping fetish teams had in 2025, with this year meant to fix that by mandating that at least 55% of the car had to be coloured. Only the Silverstone-based team decided they really liked black after all. Also nice of them to add some sponsors to the wheels, that'll be really easy to spot every time the car breaks down. Well, I'm going to change my original rating, because having seen the car on track, I think it actually suits it a lot better, but I'm just still underwhelmed once again. It's kind of becoming the theme in 2026. There we have it then, 11, well, 10.5 cars with liveries on them, and my rankings in full. Let me know how wrong you think I am down in the comments below, and if this is your first time here, get subscribed, as I'll be covering all of the 2026 season and beyond, continuing next week with the actual pre-season testing in Bahrain, well, provided F1 don't censor it this time. Well, shit. Big ups to the members and patrons who'll get early access to all of that, plus some exclusive videos from time to time. There are links down in the description if you want to find out more on that one. But for now, I'm off to do something else again, so you know the drill. Fuck off. Bro Will, without the beard, you look like a fucking eggs. I'll piss off.
That's rude.
Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to the Comedy Review, the show that unlike the cars has got bigger this season. I really enjoy doing these. Thanks, man. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport. Things like this. Lawrence Stroll seeks new Aston Martin sponsorship from BetterHelp. Liam Lawson gets a sneak preview of the Australian Grand Prix. And Jensen Button stars in Sky Sports' new show, F1 Unfucked. Anyway, more importantly, we had testing this week, so let's make a start. The big news come day one of testing was that Williams had actually shown up this week. Sidelined from the Barcelona shakedown with factory delays, the outfit would be hard-pressed to put the past behind them and crack on with the job at hand. Sky Sports' Ted Kravitz wasn't quite so keen in letting them move on, though.
Because if you were watching our coverage of the Barcelona shakedown, well, I assume you were too, because you weren't there.
With a lot of scrutiny over the team, it might be a good idea to show where all this hard work has gone. Oh, they've put eyes on the car. Nice to see they've got their priorities straight. They were at least able to clock in a fair few laps on day one. Alpine weren't quite having things their own way, the team causing a stoppage with Franco Colapinto in what they later described as a deliberate test to bring out the red flags. Sorry, are their hopes in Belgrano Boy that low, or is this 2008 again? The French wouldn't be the only cause of red flags on day one, Audi continuing their trend of being about as reliable as a Wikipedia page as Hulkenberg trundled to a halt in the afternoon. And still, could be worse, you could be Aston Martin. Lance Stroll completed the grand total of 36 laps in the morning before Honda's new engine threw out a hissy fit and sidelined the team to the garage all afternoon. And if you think that's bad, well, this turned out to be one of their better days across the 2 weeks of testing. On the bright side, we did end up with this totally not awesome footage of Lawrence Stroll looking distraught. In case you haven't seen my recent video on these new 2026 cars, one key feature added for this season is the implementation of indicator lights, designed to make drivers stand out if they've got into trouble. With Special here preoccupied in piecing his power unit back together, that left testing duties in the hands of #blessed instead. Hey, at least it's good news for Hamilton fans. According to Sky Sports, he actually really likes these new regulations.
I mean, we're slower than a GP2 car at the moment, so...
Oh, maybe not then. Hamilton's favourite teammate, Valtteri Bottas, is back for 2026, teaming up with the all-new Cadillac squad, and that year away appeared to be taking its toll. The Finn forgetting what way the track went at turn 10. Tell you what, maybe we need those indicator lights after all. On the other end of the timesheets then lied reigning world champion Lando Norris. Verstappen and Red Bull close behind in P2, with Charles Leclerc and Ferrari completing the top three. And that raised a rather important question. Where the hell were Mercedes in all this? That was undoubtedly the talk of the paddock as day two rolled around. The German outfit, clear favourites coming out of Barcelona, so clear favourites it seemed everyone else was accusing them of cheating. The Silver Arrow's compression ratio trick has been public knowledge for some time now, even getting to the point where some FIA officials were seemingly plonked onto the naughty step and told to explain themselves to the world's media. Anyway, George Russell will be over a second off the pace on day one and continue that form in the following afternoon, while Toto Wolff began crying to the media that the car was magically slow now and Red Bull were actually a second faster on the straight. A fact that was believed by, oh look, nobody. It seems a lot of the Mercedes-powered cars were given a similar memo, Alex Albon locking up around the tricky turn 10, a grand total of 4 times throughout the day, or maybe that Williams is just a bit shit, who knows. They weren't the only ones to struggle down there, even new world champion Lando Norris almost giving us a bottle before the season's even started. Cadillac were having issues of their own, Sergio Perez bringing out the first red flag of the day before the team decided to conduct some weight-saving measures, which apparently involves jettisoning pieces of carbon fibre out of the car's rectum. That was soon followed by another stoppage, and oh look, it's Alpine again, probably with another of their supposedly planned red flags. This one's super realistic as it prevented them from running for the rest of the day. With seemingly nothing of interest going on then, attention soon turned to the new boost mode available to the drivers this year. For those not in the know, this is the new overtaking aid for when a car was within a second of the driver in front. Only it's not called DRS, as the boost is invisible now, and F1 don't want that to be confused with the other moving rear wing flaps, which also aren't called DRS. Basically, if you're a Drive to Survive fan, you're fucked. The question remains then, how will us simpletons work out if a driver's using boost or not? Well, that all depends on whether the teams, and therefore us, even get that data, which Formula One haven't decided on yet. 2 weeks before the first race of the season. The top of the times would look like this then, Charles Leclerc taking his Ferrari to the top on day 2, followed closely by Lando Norris, and a little less closely by the house of Oliver Behrman. And with a few days of testing under our belt now, perhaps it's a good idea to find out what these drivers think of their new cars. Oh, I can start to see what F1 were worried about now. Now, some drivers were relatively diplomatic about their views on these new 2026 machines, Carlos Sainz going on to talk about how, quote, different they were. Then you had the likes of Max Verstappen, who was a little more blunt on the matter and described it as Formula E on steroids. And finally, you had the likes of Nozza here, who was full of praise for these new cars, before finally reading the room and admitting he was just plain lying. These comments did little to please the likes of F1 boss and disappointed substitute teacher Stefano Domenicali, who said, quote, I can't find the quote. These comments did little to please the likes of F1 boss and disappointed substitute teacher Stefano Domenicali, who said, quote, "I always try to clarify things internally. There's no point in highlighting certain points that ultimately don't interest the fan. I wasn't interested in the racing, I just really wanted to teabag Charles Leclerc." That image aside, let's just get to day 3 of testing, where these issues, well, they became rather apparent. Mercedes seemingly forgot they were meant to be sandbagging on the final day of week 1, Antonelli and Russell propping up the timing tower come the end of the day, and Ferrari's Lewis Hamilton not too far off in 3rd. Everyone seemed to miss that, however, as there were rather more pressing matters at hand. The first of these was starts, another thing that Domenicali clearly doesn't think we give a crap about. As well, we had our first crack at one at the end of day 3, and it was a complete and utter disaster. Colapinto showed Alpine what all their red flag planning was for when he almost stacked it on his way to the grid. Then, when the lights finally did go out, well, I think these images sort of speak for themselves. As it happens, removing the MGU-K from the engine now means that the drivers have to spend 10 seconds spinning up the turbo before able to get away, and that is a problem, because those at the back of the grid haven't got that luxury. F1 thus entered emergency talks to change the start sequence in what looked to be a given to go through before it was unexpectedly blocked by Ferrari, who apparently don't have this issue, well apart from when they want to turn F1's Sam Collins into a meme.
Who don't have to rev the car for as long. Let's have a look.
Another team turning heads were Audi, who had rocked up to Bahrain with a completely different aerodynamics package, seemingly modelled after the Mercedes W13. And for those not so engineeringly minded, that's like crafting the perfect girlfriend and modelling her after the f***ing Elephant Man. Elsewhere, here's the Cadillac reaching a new top speed after it brought out the red flags once again, and George Russell practicing for his next terrorist attack down on Liam Lawson at turn 1. In a move that seemingly scared the young Kiwi as he spent the remainder of the day seeing ghosts in his rearview mirror. His ex-teammate Isaac Hadjar was getting used to his new surroundings at Red Bull, whose 2026 tactics appear to include running over your competition, and will end the day with one final red flag. #Bless bringing his afternoon to an early close as he took the new SF26 on a scenic tour of Bahrain's runoff areas. I guess the last thing to check up on is Aston Martin, and they managed 72 laps today. And get this, they're only 4.5 seconds off the pace. They might just be challenging Caddy in Australia at this rate.
What you doing there, Bill? Satellite dish trouble?
No, I'm just up here to kill myself.
Day 4 came after 4 days off for the 11 teams to go about and solve all their problems, which is why it was particularly impressive when Aston Martin rolled out the garage and somehow ended up being worse. After a productive morning with Fernando Alonso in the car, Special stepped in for the afternoon and lasted a grand total of 7 laps before Adrian Newey's latest design felt like it was more aerodynamically efficient to go into turn 11 backwards. Juan Pablo Montoya came out this week and claimed the team were just sandbagging. More like the engine's been modelled after a real one. Stroll would return later in the day, where the team continued to learn more about their 2026 challenger. For example, we know alongside it being a fat load of horseshit, it's also racist to Pirelli tyres. Lando Norris broke up with his girlfriend this week, being another to take out his anger on the Italian rubber and weight bridges for some reason. While newest addition to the grid, Arvid Lindblad revealed that he was still yet to learn about that rather important turning thing that the other drivers seem to be doing out there. And race starts still seem to be very much on the agenda. Look, here's Nico Hulkenberg giving one a go. I think the technical term for that is f***ing dreadful. George Russell would go top of the table once again come the end of the day, Piastri just 100th of a second behind, and Charles Leclerc rounding out the top 3 for the glue factory. And as Mercedes remembered that they were meant to be sandbagging again, it was time for day 5, and Ferrari to do Ferrari things again. The Scuderia would come out of the garage sporting some radical features on the rear of their SF26, starting with a butt plug, which I'm reliably told is a particularly hard-to-copy design, before debuting a radical rotating rear wing as part of their active aero setup. Ferrari become the only team to have read the regulations in this way, which means this could be a dramatic development that propels the team back to the top of the constructors. Or it could be shit. Team boss Fred Vasseur was rather coy about his chances in a press conference more dominated by Mercedes, and specifically Toto Wolff saying this.
Maybe tomorrow we're inventing something else. That I don't know, I've been on the Epstein files, God knows what.
It'd be really awkward if he does appear in them now. As F1 Twitter once again failed to understand the concept of a joke, the Silver Arrows were once again doing their talking on the racetrack, Antonelli on top once again, Piastri and Verstappen in hot pursuit. The whole engine drama seems to have calmed down a bit now. The teams were meant to come together and vote to ban the compression ratio trick, but now it seems the way in which the FIA would want to do that just risks compromising everyone. So the teams had to vote against themselves on the rules that they wanted to bring in. Welcome to another day at the pinnacle of motorsport. We got our standard spell of lock-ups and then our standard spell of Aston Martin retirements, which led to Fernando Alonso spending the rest of the day recreating all his favourite pain memes from across the years. That meant Aston would sit out on what the FIA described as the first proper start test of 2026. I guess they just forgot about broadcasting this one then. Anyway, clearly the teams felt much more confident going into this one, which is why they've left such a huge gap between themselves. Granted, when the lights went out, this was better, and in fairness to Ferrari, with their smaller turbo, they really looked to have an advantage. You see, sometimes good things can come in small packages. I'm going to shut up now. One final day of pre-season testing, with a general consensus around the paddock, was something along the lines of, thank f*** it's finally over. Let's start with our last instalment of Aston Watch then. This statement hitting the press before the car had even got out on track, Honda admitting that they might have a tiny problem, which hasn't been at all evident, has it? The Silverstone Bay squad decided to change tack on day 6, and in fairness to them, got through their entire run plan. We should note that their entire run plan consisted of 6 laps, however. That meant by lunchtime, and yet another power unit problem, Aston announced they were done for the day and promptly rage-quitted ahead of the afternoon. It also means they're the only team not to have completed the practice start yet, so good luck to anyone starting behind them in Australia. Actually, who are we kidding on that one? After causing a stir on day 5, Ferrari were back out on circuit, with Charles Leclerc giving his team a heart attack early on. The Monegasque went on to improve to set the fastest time of the day, as Mercedes let their engines sandbag for them, Antonelli pulling over with no energy recovery behind him, though still with more power than the Honda program. We've not spoken much about Haas so far. They've been busy being particularly mid and flying firmly under the radar. So here's Esteban Ocon taking intermediates onto the Bahrain International Circuit for the first time, just so somebody notices him. And with one last practice start, which went more or less the same as the day before, that was it. 6 days of testing, and come the end of it all, we still have no idea who's going to be fastest. Well, other than it probably not being Aston Martin. So, what have we learned? Well, here are my key testing takeaways ahead of the first race in Australia. The top 4 are maybe closer than we expected, with Mercedes' advantage perhaps not quite as big as we all maybe thought. Cars could be more suited to different tracks than ever before, making this championship actually somewhat exciting. Well, until this ages like shit in 2 weeks' time. Starts are going to be interesting, and by interesting, I think that one in Australia might just be one to wake up for if, like me, you live in the UK and enjoy the 22 fastest men on the planet looking like f***ing imbeciles. Cadillac are slow, but look more competent than many gave them credit for. It's going to be a long road, but I don't think we're in for a 2010 repeat at least. And finally, you should probably hit that subscribe button, as this championship's either going to be really exciting or an absolute farce. And both of those are a fantastic recipe for a good old comedy review. I'll be covering every race in 2026, plus all of IndyCar as well, which kicks off next weekend in St. Pete's, with content on that starting very soon indeed. So if you want to pay me back for that lack of a sleep schedule, that like button is just down below there for you. And if you want to watch that early, then go and check out the Patreon. They get another episode of FP1 Unfiltered this week. Now I've finally remembered that exclusive series still exists, which, actually come to think of it, I should probably go and film right now. So in the meantime, f*** off.
It is the start of a new year, the start of a new rule set. Get that turbo spinning.
Hi there, I'm a mini turbo, just like the Ferrari turbo.
No, I've got nothing. Actually, yeah, I do. What the fuck?
That's rude.
Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to the Comedy Review, the show that locks in faster than Max Verstappen's drive shaft. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport. Things like this. Liam Lawson cream pies a V-carb fan, Lewis Hamilton gets gassed, and Toto Wolff gets a bit too excited about Mercedes' dominance. More on that in a minute, but first, it's time for the return of something a long time coming. Welcome to Aston Watch. It's been a few years, but now they're shit again. What better time to bring this back? When we left off after pre-season testing, the team had just completed 6 laps on the final day, called that their complete run plan, and gone radio silent, thinking we'd all forget about it and move on with our lives, forgetting at the end of the day that we're F1 fans. We haven't got one of those. Adrian Newey thus broke the stalemate with this press conference on Media Day, where even the microphones failed to work. Aero Jesus breaking the news that Aston was set to likely retire from the Australian Grand Prix after just a handful of laps, because after so long, if the Honda engine vibrations haven't made the car explode, they'll just give the drivers permanent nerve damage instead. So how can us simpletons even begin to understand what this feels like? Well, don't worry, I think Lance Stroll's got us covered with that one.
I guess just like electrocute yourself in a chair or something like that.
Hang on, how do you know? From here on out, Aston opted to fully whip out the victim card, fully blaming Honda and claiming they didn't know that 70% of their original workforce had kindly f***ed off till November of last year, despite it being clearly common knowledge that Red Bull had snapped up most of them and the rest had apparently changed their LinkedIn status to working on solar panels, which I assume is a code word for Kim Kardashian's next plastic surgery. Elsewhere in the news, the world's apparently coming to an end, which is fun, isn't it? 2026's latest trend to landscape the Middle East has put several up-and-coming Grand Prix in jeopardy. Bahrain and Saudi Arabia now rumoured not to go ahead, which really is a shame. A few creators might actually make the racing exciting over there. Now you think this should be a fairly easy decision to make, but then I put these images on your screen, you can see why F1 are starting to hope that if they just wait a little bit longer, the whole situation might just go away. We've already seen missile strikes in Jeddah before, the 2022 running becoming a prime example of why it's so dangerous. Mick Schumacher took it as f***ing inspiration. This all seems to have put everybody on edge, but for me, I'm feeling pretty chill about the whole thing. I get a few weeks off, might even go on holiday. The here to buy suddenly got a lot cheaper. Time for practice then, with a big question circulated about these brand new cars, which was bloody good because they weren't very good at circulating themselves. Oscar Piastri started this weekend with a low-power run to greet all his fans and give them a good look at the new silhouette of the 2026 machines, which is probably the only positive thing about them. Still, could be worse. Lando Norris spent his FP1 needing his arsehole fingered by his McLaren mechanics. Didn't realise that was a perk of being a world champion. Now, Formula One have announced this new campaign called All to Drive For and put out this promo video, which according to the sport, comes in 60-second, 30-second and 15-second formats, which is an interesting way of declaring you've got nothing to say about it. Nice to know where my stolen ad revenue's gone then. Anyway, the slogan's been plastered up and down the pit lane, not that it was helpful for new rookie Arvid Lindblad, who ironically had no drive as his V-carb had to be pushed back into the pits. He'd at least return and finish the session in P5. Meanwhile, fellow debutants Cadillac were suffering with issues of their own, Sergio Perez attempting to shake off his Red Bull syndrome and Valtteri Bottas being caught out by #blessed not being quite as quick as he used to be. It was the Ferrari driver's teammate who went top after the opening hour of practice, Charles Leclerc, fastest for the glue factory and half a second ahead of Hamilton in second. Not bad for the boys in red. Now let's see how Aston Martin are getting on, and if they're still allegedly sandbagging, they're doing a bloody good job at it. Lance Stroll was half a minute off the pace, managing the grand total of 3 laps, which was still 3 more than Fernando Alonso was able to do. The Spaniard relegated to swiping through my new reels, which I've started to do over on Instagram, which is a pretty nice bridge for a plug, isn't it? We end FP1 then with Hadjar shitting himself and Albon declaring his car should go on a diet, which clearly hurt its feelings as it proceeded to kill itself on the back straight. No contact in the opening session though, which soon changed once FP2 got underway. Russell and Lindblad coming to blows before the cars even emerged from the pit lane.
This guy's just hit my front wing.
Yeah, kinda happens when you drive into someone, George. The Conservative Party leader, clearly being on his period, was enough to scare Max Verstappen's Red Bull, it refusing to leave the pit lane, and later in the day we found out why. Max performing his own weight-saving upgrades by transforming his brand new floor into a cheese grater. Teammate Isaac Hadjar was busy experimenting with the Piastri line through the penultimate corner, and Lewis Hamilton discovered the full extent of Colapinto's pace on the main straight. The Ferraris had clearly thought they'd found all their pace on the track in FP1, as by the afternoon session they were experimenting with things like the gravel or grass, for their fans' mental well-being. The matters weren't going much better for Cadillac, who were busy watching their mirrors fall off, though granted I don't think they'll need them anyway. The only exceptions to that might be for the Aston Martins, and well done to Fernando Alonso, who made it out onto the circuit in FP2, clocking in 18 laps and being only 5 seconds off the pace this time. Home hero Oscar Piastri was able to top the session in his McLaren, and that just begs the question, where the hell were Mercedes? Oh, and the gravel. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. George Russell would go top in FP3, but that session would come at a cost for the Silver Arrows. Kimi Antonelli has been getting into a prank war with Bono over the last few weeks, all from water guns to spicy drinks, and, well, now this.
I need to hit Bono.
It's a bit extreme, isn't it? That would put him in doubt for qualifying, and he wouldn't be the only one. Carlos Sainz's Williams choosing its turn to have a hissy fit and parking up annoyingly short of the pit lane entry. Not to be outdone, as soon as the track went back to green, Alex Albon decided he wanted to practice retiring as well, but was forced to carry on by the Williams pit wall. With not much else to complain about, attention soon shifted to the cars themselves. The 2026 machines spotted noticeably slowing down at the ends of straights. Dubbed super clipping, and if you've been an F1 fan for any length of time, you'll know that adding super to the start of a name really does little to make it a good thing. The FIA, meanwhile, decided the best way to fix the problem was just to make the cars slower in general, removing one of the straight line modes between turns 8 and 9 before U-turning like a certain Red Bull driver in a minute after the drivers and teams began to kick off. Anyway, let's get to the fastest part of the weekend then, and watch this get even worse. Max Verstappen had been complaining all about his steering column throughout FP3, so it decided to show him just how quickly it could turn around on the Dutchman's first flying lap in Q1. That sent him on a one-way trip to the wall and would have turned Max into the first casualty of the session, had Sainz and Stroll not given up before we'd even started. Don't ask me why, by the way, I overslept, and the highlights package is doing all to tell me either. Oh yeah, we need the first of these in 2026, don't we? Well, that wasn't great for my sanity. It was good news for Mercedes and Kimi Antonelli, who used the red flag period to rebuild the Italian's self-imposed jigsaw puzzle, just in time to get him out to compete in the weekend. With only 3 slots left in the Q1 drop zone then, that gave the backmarkers of Cadillac and Alonso a semi-realistic chance to move on into Q2. Fernando looking to be the one to make the shot progression, before Franco Colapinto finally managed to find 2 brain cells to rub together and demote the Spaniard into 17th for the race on Sunday. You'd think his interview after would be gold dust after this, but it really wasn't.
We could all bet that we were not able to go through Q1, and we nearly made it. So, yeah, I think definitely progress.
Do you think this is like that Jim Carrey thing? Alonso refuses to even show up, so they've just replaced him with a lookalike who's actually positive. Q2 will continue the trend of Alpine being repeatedly mid, both cars knocked out of the second session after coming out of testing expecting to be the best of the rest. This is starting to sound a little bit familiar, isn't it? They got Steve here to go and explain the situation. Apparently he's their team principal now. Is it just me, or when the f*** did this happen? The Haas cars, Albon and Hulkenberg, would also fail to make the cut. Audi a surprise in this session, partly because they were quick and partly because their engine hadn't identified as an Iranian drone yet. That all came a bit too soon for Gabi Bortoleto, however. The Brazilian getting into the top 10 shootout, but so used to going out by this stage, he pulled over in the pit entry and almost caused the VCARB civil war in the process. That leaves 9 cars in the shootout for pole, though judging by Toto Wolff's face, I've got a feeling we should probably bring that down to 2. Sure enough, Mercedes were rapid, and not just on track, even getting out of the pit box. They were in fact so quick, the engineers hadn't had time to remove Kimi Antonelli's cooling fans, allowing the Italian to instead deposit them onto the track in the first sector and provide reigning world champion Lando Norris with a lovely present in a mutilated floor. Here we go again. That wouldn't stop the Briton lining up second in the initial runs, beaten only by Russell, albeit by half a second. Kimi Antonelli, meanwhile, was thanking his engineers for rebuilding his car by almost presenting them with another one on his first attempt. He'd at least rectify that for the final showdown, lining up second to Russell and locking in an all-Mercedes front row. Isaac Hadjar then spawned into P3, making this his best qualifying in an event that, fingers crossed, will last a little longer than this time last year. Leclerc and the McLaren duo would make up the top 6, with Hamilton coming across the line in 7th, which is probably a win for him these days, and that sets up a very interesting race for the final spot on the podium tomorrow. So let's not waste any more time, shall we? Moments like this we'll never forget. Yeah, moments like these as well, I suppose. Heartbreak for Oscar Piastri, who decided he wanted to be this year's Isaac Hadjar and bin it before the race even started, and he managed to make an even more embarrassing mistake, doing it in the dry and on his f***ing installation lap to the grid. Makes these viral tweets a little bit awkward. Oscar, I suppose now you could join in. Well, at least that leaves 21 cars for the start. Sorry, mate, that 20. Nico Hulkenberg's Audi has reportedly refused to wake up. A brand new era of Formula 1 would kick off then. Exactly how we expected it to. The Ferraris would shoot to the front, Leclerc going from 4th to 1st by turn 1, while further back, Colapinto did the best thing of his entire career and restrained from mercy-killing Liam Lawson. The Kiwi's teammate was enjoying having a battery meanwhile, moving up to 4th in the opening corners, then flipping the script completely by momentarily passing Hadjar for P3, before #Blessed made a move on both of them. Watching his race seat slip away already, Hadjar restored the order by the start of lap 2 by repassing the VCARB into turn 1. At the same time, we were being treated to a frenetic battle for the lead, Russell and Leclerc swapping possession in the opening tours. Now, I've not missed a Formula 1 race in the last 16 years, and this, well, I've never seen anything like this before. Oh, hang on, no, sorry, we hate it apparently. Yeah, f you, Formula One, how dare you give us good racing? Maybe this was a little artificial, sure. Maybe F1 fans have been devoid for the touch of a woman or an overtake for so long they forgot what it means to be stimulated. But we've been begging for racing for so many years now, and yet people are still not happy when it finally delivers. Even Lewis Hamilton being good wasn't enough to change people's minds. The Briton are now caught up to the leading pair, making it a three-way scrap for P1. There was further excitement further down the order. Max Verstappen cutting his way through the pack from the rear, Fernando Alonso somehow running in 10th, and maybe Hadjar in P4 can make this lead battle even more... Oh, actually, never mind that last one. The Frenchman lasted 11 more laps than he did 12 months ago, but now his engine decided it was done for the day as he pulled over in a plume of smoke just before turn 9. That brought out the virtual safety car, the leaders taking advantage by diving into the pits. Well, most of the leaders. Take a guess who didn't. Introducing the first point on our new glue factory counter for 2026, Ferrari took one look at the advantage of pitting under VSC and decided they just didn't want it, retaining the lead despite being given multiple opportunities to correct their monumental f**k-up. Meanwhile, on Aston watch, Fernando Alonso began the next retirement of the day, lasting just 15 laps before his engine gave up the ghost. With the Scuderia ruining any racing at the front, we took a look further down the field, where Perez and Lawson were busy having an AA meeting for ex-Helmut Marko victims. Checo not one to forget the pass as he was shuffled down to P15. The caddy just being able to race was probably a win for the team. Meanwhile, on the other side of the garage, well, looks like Bottas preferred spectating after all. Another virtual safety car, or a godsend for Ferrari, who by now must have realised their mistake in not pitting before and could rectify that straight away. Oh, never mind, they're staying out again. By the time the strategist sign-ups had kicked into gear, the pit lane entry was closed and the Scuderia was stuck in no man's land once again. Lewis Hamilton on the radio reading out their job description just in case they'd forgotten they had one. Verstappen's silent comeback was also drawing attention. By lap 20, he was past Limblad and up into P6. The Dutchman was making these moves look easy. Meanwhile, the battle of the baguettes down the road was heating up, Gasly restraining himself from killing ex-teammate Ocon down into turn 3. As his front wing declared itself part of the Third Reich, Ferrari were finally in for their green flag pit stops on lap 26, somewhat perplexed by the fact they were now 10 seconds behind the leading Mercedes runners and giving up track position to Kimi Antonelli. The hope was that the Mercedes would have to pit again and we'd get a dramatic conclusion to the race, but given we're halfway through the distance and 80% of the way through the highlights package, yeah, I think we know what way this one's going. Fernando Alonso was back out, I guess. Oh, that doesn't sound very good. We get our third and final VSC of the day when the caddy started falling to bits again, Australia putting marshals on the track at a blind corner, which I suppose is cheaper than a holiday to Switzerland, I guess. And that was sort of it. Bar some shuffling in the mid-pack and Stroll retiring, though who cares. The rest of this one was just us sat there waiting for Mercedes to, well, do something. Only they didn't, and Russell would cruise to a comfortable race victory ahead of Antonelli and Leclerc. Hamilton spending the final stint getting ever closer to his teammate, though just missing out on the final few laps to make an actual impression. Still, this is probably the best he's looked in the last 5 years, so Team LH can wank themselves off happy, I suppose. As Toto Wolff celebrated by almost decapitating himself, what do I think? Well, considering how shit we thought this race was supposed to be, it's a small sample size, but that was a lot better than I expected. Let's be honest, the super clipping on the straights is f***ing stupid, and the onboard cameras should just be muted from here on out as they're depressing to listen to on the live feed. But as far as overtakes go, this one delivered. They were probably a little too easy in the mid-pack, but that initial scrap for the lead between Russell and Leclerc was bloody brilliant, and could have made this race one for the ages had the glue factory not done glue factory things once the VSC came out. I need to see more to give a proper opinion, but so far, so good. I wonder what Twitter think. Oh good, I'm being eaten alive over there. Now, a couple of things before we do round up, and first off, the announcement of a brand new series. I've decided that I hate myself this year, and I'm going to cover Formula 2 on the comedy review as well. That'll be in the form of exclusive content for members and patrons, and will release later on this afternoon, so go and check that out using the links in the description down below. Secondly, as you may have noticed, I've been posting some short form content as well. I'm going to continue doing that over on my Instagram page, so if you want my unfiltered thoughts on the latest F1 news, go and give that a follow, and a big thank you for helping us hit the big 5,000 on that already. And finally, if you enjoyed this video, then hit that like and get subscribed, as I'll be covering the entire 2026 season here on the Comedy Review, and you won't want to miss what's next. The way the algorithm works now means if this is your first time here, you may never well see my face again, so hit that subscribe button and let it know how satisfied you are down in the comments below. Now I'm running on 3 hours sleep, and I'm on my second monster of the morning already, so I'll have to go have a heart attack now. In the meantime, you lot can f*** off. So the verdict's come in, and people really don't like Formula 1 right now. The engines don't work, there's too much overtaking, and basically we didn't think this thing through at all. Well, at least we've got another weekend to get some practice in. Oh, never mind, Formula 1 want to do a sprint. That's rude. Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to the Comedy Review, the show that's more explosive than that. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport. Things like this. Ferrari test out their new 2026 simulator. F1 graphics get really optimistic. And David Lindblad is on Hinge. I think I found out who the special someone is. You know, they better get paid extra for that. Anyway, on the subject of uniting through languages, let's talk about Iran. Current world events continue to be depressing this week, only now I actually care about it, as it's affecting Formula 1. Piss off with your flags, I'm putting an F1 car in my bio. While it's not 100% official as of time of recording, it's now widely accepted that the Bahrain and Saudi Arabian Grand Prix are set to be cancelled, as these 9/11 copycat killers have made hosting the races next to impossible. It's not the first time this has happened. The Bahrain Grand Prix called off after these lovely protesters rolled out their secondary school science projects outlining what would happen if we bombed a Formula 1 car back in 2011. The result, Mercedes lose their 2026 home Grand Prix and we lose all of our racing for the entire month of April, with everyone unwilling to schedule replacements at such short notice. You're telling me no one fancied a return to Sochi? Elsewhere in the news, people apparently hate Formula 1. The new rules package has divided fans, being likened more to Mario Kart, and even the greatest in our sport apparently driven to the edge.
Yeah, finding the mushrooms is going quite well.
Did the FIA regulations let you get away with saying that? Starts have also been a concern after Franco Colapinto nearly found himself taking an early flight to China at the beginning of the Australian Grand Prix. Can't believe I missed that last week, but apparently it was so good the stewards even named a penalty after him. Problem is, attempts to amend the regulations have failed after Ferrari vetoed the new rules to change the start procedure, probably something to do with the fact that they're the only people who are quite good at them. The Scuderia's Smaller Turbo has been identified as the source of all their success, the team essentially turning around to the rest of the paddock and saying this:
Change your car. You've got a problem. Change your fucking car.
The glue factory have been rather quiet in the press about the whole ordeal, instead opting to show off the 3 new Chinese words Leclerc's learned this week. Kudos to Charles though, he's probably the first white man to say he's going to speak Chinese, then this not turn into a racist Instagram reel. As Ferrari meme culture continued to invade the paddock, the prancing horses were attempting to draw attention to a new story, their rotisserie chicken rear wing making a return for the single practice session ahead of F1 2026's first sprint weekend. This was a ballsy move, having no time to go back and test their older design if their new one wasn't reliable. Really hope that doesn't happen. Lewis Hamilton was busy showing off how it wasn't just his rear wing that could do a 180 in a busy session for the Briton, who also found himself at the mercy of Lord Bottle down at the final corner. Franco Colapinto was another running into difficulty, seen here testing Max Verstappen's qualifying lines and later breaking down in the pit lane, where he proceeded to make more friends as he made his Alpine mechanics run all the way up it just to flick them the bird as he refired the car and shot back past them again. I suppose that's what you call the Colapinto and go penalty. Ollie Behrman was frightened by the sheer pace of Aston Watch, and rookie Arvid Lindblad was forced to pull over as well, his V-carb seemingly suffering from a chronic vape addiction. The McLarens would end the session testing out their silver arrow avoidance lines, though still go P3 and 4, behind the Mercedes pair in FP1. Russell leading the way into sprint qualifying, but before that, a bit of an opportunity for you. If you want some 2026 official merch on the cheap, keep watching. So channel partner Castor sent me a new package. It's not worked, has it? So channel partner Castor just sent me a new package. So channel partner Castor sent me a new package. So channel partner Castor sent me a new package. What the fuck? So channel partner Castor sent me a new package. Let's see what we got. So kicking us off, we have... I don't know what this is. Actually, I do know what this is. This is the brand new Haas merch for 2026. That is fit, to be honest. I will take that 100%. And Toyota Gazoo Racing on the back. We are all good. That is going to look good in a comedy review this year. 100%. Need to swap hats. Shame Castle don't do hats. I think this is the Nikita Mazepin one. And the other thing we've got appears to be some new shorts for the gym, which I do go to. If you're following the Instagram page, you should know that by now. I'm not going to put these on. You'll see them on a story at some point. Now, if you want some new merch without the need to sell a kidney, then you can use the code that's floating above my head somewhere right now to get 15% off your order, or just use the link in my description or bio. You're not thick, you know what platform you're watching on. And full disclosure, if you use the code, I get a bit on the side as well. So if you want to help support the channel and get some new merch while you're at it, then you know what to do. Cadillac's F1 honeymoon stalled out when Sergio Perez failed to even leave the garage, Valtteri Bottas making it a little further, that being to the end of the pit lane before he seemingly conked out as well. So that's 2 spots in the drop zone filled, 4 left to work out. Well, actually 2, given we're already discounting Aston Martin. Nerves were definitely on edge as it transpired Alpine had seemingly found some pace, Gasly up as high as 7th and Colapinto free from the drop zone as well. Instead, it would be the Williams pair ending their afternoon early, Albon 6/10 behind Sainz, which by the looks of things made their fan base very unhappy. Gasly and Behrman continued to shock in SQ2 as they progressed to the top 10 shootout, leaving the Red Bull pair on the brink of elimination, only made more embarrassing by the fact that the 2 that could do it happened to also drive for the sister team. Lawson and Lindblad valued their future Formula 1 careers and thus opted to remain in the drop zone, placing the threat with Frenchman Esteban Ocon, which isn't really much of a threat, is it? More like a mild inconvenience. Russell and Antonelli would trade fastest laps in SQ3, the Merc pair comfortably ahead of the Ferraris behind. They wouldn't be able to improve on their second lap, however, opening the door for a surprise pole sitter, which never really came. Sorry for getting your hopes up on that one. Instead, Charles Leclerc fancied being shit as he trailed Hamilton by half a second in P4, which soon became P6, and he was jumped by both McLarens. Norris in particular impressed to slot the number 1 into 3rd, as Red Bull were out-qualified by Pierre Gasly, which considering the history there must have felt rather satisfying for Monsieur Baguette here. George Russell's on pole then, so it's time to get to the sprint, which starts at 3 AM. Bear with me, I'm just going to go kill myself. Now, I'll be honest, I was drunk off my slightly bigger than usual tits while this was going on, so bear with me as I try to interpret F1's highlight package. George Russell got off the line well, the same not able to be said for Kimi Antonelli, who fell back and found himself play fighting with Hadjar on the opening lap. These pair were spotted on the flight earlier in the week, discussing the race cancellations in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, Hadjar reportedly telling Antonelli that those were 2 races that he wouldn't win, the Italian clearly taking that as an abhorrent insult as here he is driving into the side of the Frenchman. With our new Mercedes terrorist counter getting its first appearance of 2026 and Antonelli picking up a 10-second time penalty, we were busy watching a ding-dong battle between teammate George Russell and Ferrari's Lewis Hamilton for the lead. Lindblad also spun here, though as far as I'm aware it was never explained or returned to again. Similar to Australia, we watched the lead change hands multiple times in the opening tours until George Russell got bored of playing with his food and shot off into the distance. Kimi Antonelli, trying to recover from his ballsed-up start, took a risk by diving down the inside of one of the Haas cars, praying it wasn't Esteban Ocon, and considering both are still alive, this must have been Behrman instead. As Antonelli continued to move past the McLarens into 4th, the Ferrari pair were playing into his hands by squabbling over P2, both of them going side by side on lap 9, which for some reason wasn't to the liking of Charles Leclerc.
The space? Does he know how wide all these cars are?
I'm not sure it's time for a pub quiz. Max Verstappen put on this blind river move on 2 cars into turn 1, and he then immediately ruined it when he spurred off the road 2 corners later. The Dutchman's saving grace coming in the form of German efficiency, Nico Hülkenberg's Audi realising it wasn't getting any points and thus promptly killing itself down at the first corner. The resulting safety car saw most of the grid jump to the pit lane, Hamilton dropping further back behind Norris after being held for the double stack with Leclerc. Still, could be worse. The other McLaren of Piastri found himself under fire when Antonelli decided to pick up some pebbles on the safety car restart. The Aussie had technically passed the Italian before the safety car line, though giving the position back was going to be easier said than done. You see, some drivers had opted to gamble and not pit under the safety car, thus giving them track position on the restart. This didn't really work, though at least gave us some overtakes at the end of this one. Piastri thus had to wait until the V-Cup of Lawson had fallen far enough off a cliff before handing P5 back to the Mercedes, stunting his growth at the end as Russell came across the line to take victory from the pair of Ferraris. Oh, and the Cadillac fell apart, but I suppose that wasn't PG enough for the TV highlights. Good news for George Russell then, though not the most popular win if you are ex-Bell End of the Week. So you lot wanted this series back, so here it is. And kicking us off, wishing drivers get into fatal accidents. This pussy revived the series when he was spotted tweeting this: "I'm so scared, who's stopping Russell from a 24 out of 24 season? We need a fatal crash now. OMFG, emoji spam, because I have all the brain cells of a fucking Just Stop Oil protester." Not quite sure what the poster wanted out of this, but the replies were, well, fairly tame. I think you lot need to get your act together. Most people in the comments assumed this individual just didn't know what fatal meant and proceeded to make it their duty to educate this wrong'un and make them better their ways. Do you know what is meant by the meaning of fatal crash? It results in death. As does scrolling on this app for too long. Anyway, thank you to everyone who brought this to my attention, and if you want to nominate the next ex-Bell End of the Week, use the hashtag on screen, tag me on the platform, or join our Discord server. Now, time to get on with Grand Prix qualifying. Oh look, he's back with an idea I actually agree with. Cadillac were able to get out of the pits this time. Did that change the elimination order much? Well, not really, but they did beat Stroll, which is an achievement, I suppose. Williams continued to have a mare, James Vowell, sounding like someone had just broke his special saint-shaped fleshlight over the team radio as his pride and joy was wheeled back into the garage. As the world quickly moved on and got on with Q2, it was another name in the hot seat. Isaac Hadjar on the brink of being out yet again, all those Twitter users waiting with their second seat post with bated breath, unsatisfied as he clung on in the number 6 car. Gabriel Bortoletto played a critical role in that, mixing up Hadjar with his best buddy Verstappen and thus sacrificing himself at the final corner to stop anyone from going quicker. The Q2 drop zone was once again then identical to the day before. The Audis, RBs, Colapinto and Ocon failing to make the cut as we got ready for another Mercedes showdown in Q3. The odds were in favour of George Russell once again, despite the Briton complaining in Q2 and asking for his front wing to be replaced ahead of the final session. The car then fighting back and asking for George Russell to be replaced 2 corners into Q3. The Briton was able to get the car refired and back into the pits. While the team rallied around to it, teammate Kimi Antonelli was soaring to the top of the times, who had Ferrari and McLaren hot on his heels behind. The Italian would further improve on his final run as Hamilton and Leclerc joined him in the top 3. So we all waited to see if George Russell had managed to respawn. As it turned out, he had, though was unable to challenge his teammate at the front, meaning Kimi Antonelli takes his first F1 pole and becomes the youngest pole sitter in the sport's history, because apparently sprint events just don't exist, I guess. Would he convert that into a first win on Sunday, or would he just get off the line like a dementia patient again? Well, let's not waste any more time and find out. Sunday would open with the official confirmation that the Saudi and Bahrain Grand Prix had been cancelled. As we scrambled around looking for someone who actually cared, it was time for McLaren not to make the race start again. It was Lando Norris in trouble this time, the British driver not satisfied when he hopped into the car on Sunday afternoon, even this mechanic taking one for the team not suitable pleasurement, and the McLaren driver would be out before this one even started. That's alright, it was just papaya rules. Oscar pins it last week, it's only fair that Lando doesn't get to make the start this time. Well, hang on a minute, the other McLaren's just been pulled off the grid as well. And he wasn't the only one. Audi watching the McLarens be moved into the pits and thinking this was some sort of technical advantage, wheeling Bortoletto away as well. Then put out a statement claiming they were still investigating why they did that. No, I'm not making that up. And if you're wondering, McLaren's Twitter has aged badly for now a second week in a row. With Albon deciding he'd rather sit this one out as well, the grid very much representing the state of Formula 1 at the moment then, the lights would go out, and fair play to Antonelli. He did find his accelerator pedal this time, but that still wasn't good enough to stop the fast-charging Ferrari of Hamilton to slot into P1. Isaac Hadjar was having an interesting opening lap, sparring with the Haas of Behrman, before making the move and promptly finding an alternative to his mirrors to see if the Briton was still behind him. Still, could be worse, the Cadillacs had just driven into each other, and Max Verstappen went into this one, claiming it would be good if he could fight with the Alpines. Well, they're 5th and 6th, and Max is busy playing with the Astons, so that's going well. While the commentators were using Colapinto's P6 to remind us how shit he was in 2025, at the front, Mercedes spent little time getting back ahead of the glue factory, Antonelli retaking the lead down into turn 1 on lap 2. As they cruised off into the horizon, what we really needed was a safety car. Thankfully, Aston Martin was still running in the field. Lance Stroll got bored on lap 10 and decided to bunch the pack back up, forcing most of the grid into the pit lane. Apart from the hard runners, that meant Antonelli led Colapinto to green, and the Argentine's playdate with Ocon caught Russell out and allowed Hamilton to move into 4th. That'll give us another overtake then, probably the best thing Colapinto's done in his entire career. Well, besides maybe this at least. Russell's day then got even better when Leclerc made his way by half a lap later. A lot further back, the Aston Martin was doing its best Cadillac impression. At least Fernando can see the funny side now. Antonelli was breaking free out front, Hamilton holding up Leclerc behind, and the swap between the Ferraris seeming inevitable. There's 2 options here, I suppose. You can throw out team orders, or do it the Ferrari way, and watch the pair almost wipe each other out at turn 2. A fantastic battle between these two though, George Russell opting to hang back and just wait for the great Italian explosion, eventually getting bored of the Ferrari sitcom and just passing these guys instead. All this bitching was fantastic news for Kimi Antonelli, who had used the squabbling to build up an 8-second gap out front. As attention turned to a potential 2-stop strategy, V-Carb's Arvid Lindblad very keen to switch onto fresh rubber, which might have had something to do with him going to the penultimate corner backwards a few laps ago. Franco Colapinto had just completed his second stop, though Alpine hadn't factored in the Argentinian coming out into the warpath of Esteban Ocon, who handed Valtteri Bottas a present in someone else to play with for the second half of this one. That was particularly good timing considering Fernando Alonso had just retired. Back in the Italian Civil War, Hamilton was complaining of low power, Ferrari unable to resolve this, but the Briton promptly shutting up anyway when Leclerc decided he wanted to mutilate his front tyres into the hairpin. That rather set up the rest of this one, sitting around, waiting for Ferrari to, well, do something. All the while, Kimi Antonelli looked absolutely untouchable. Well, apart from maybe this bit. The Italian looked the class of the field today, no issues as he crossed the lines to take his inaugural Grand Prix win and inevitably start the conversation. Could this guy just challenge for a title this year? I'm not completely convinced by that, but it's very early days in this championship. And focusing on this race on the whole, it was pretty damn good. Those opening 15 laps in Australia really set us up for the action in this one. Will F1 fans still be happy? No, but say the V at the end of the day. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below. Fair play to Lewis Hamilton on his first Grand Prix podium for Ferrari, which we got to eventually, I suppose. The threat of Ollie Bearman, though, is not quite out of the woods yet. P5 in the Haas, and ahead of Max Verstappen before the Dutchman blew up in the closing stages. Yeah, I really wouldn't want to be in a room with him right now. If you enjoyed the comedy review, be sure to do give it a like and get subscribed. Responses to last week's episode were mega, so thank you very much for that. The algorithm gets turned on by all those positive comments down below, so keep them coming. It really helps the channel out. Your reminder as well that we've got a Formula 2 comedy review out now. That's exclusive to members and patrons, so links are down below if you want to go and check that out. And big thanks to Castor for the new kit once again. Links are down there for that as well. And use that code FP1WILL15 for 15% off your order. Now we've got IndyCar up next, so I'm off to go and make that comedy review. In the meantime, you lot can off.
Do you ever daydream while driving, or are you 100% locked in?
Yeah, I do have a daydream while driving.
Well, that explains a lot.
That's rude.
Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to the Comedy Review, the show that's somehow more empathetic to the two Alpine drivers than Flavio is. Jeez, that really is saying something. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport. Things like this. For the first time ever, David Croft comes face to face with something bigger than David Croft.
He's angry! He's angry at Aston Martin, ladies and gentlemen!
Naomi Schiff asks Max Verstappen a stupid question.
Out of all of the eras of Formula One cars that you've driven, would you say that this is your favorite?
Probably, I would say, least favorite.
And McLaren have a new pet, it seems.
Alright everybody, we have a new pet for this weekend. We have a Tamagotchi.
There's also the Japanese Grand Prix to talk about, but first, we've got our weekly dose of Aston Watch. Welcome to Aston Watch, the show documenting Fernando Alonso's impending spiral towards a Swiss clinic. This week, our focus is on Aero Jesus here. And it seems we're at that point in the story where Christ gets hung up on a massive f***ing cross and the rest of the world revel in his slow demise. Adrian Newey has made another sacking this week, himself, as Aston comes to the realisation that one man can't do everything. To the shock of, let me just check. Oh yeah, no one. Replacing Baldy over here is Sauber team principal Jonathan Wheatley, which seemed to come as a bit of a surprise, even to Sauber themselves.
And get involved in a really exciting project, and that's where I find myself now.
Well, that was a f***ing lie. His betrayal aside, Wheatley may just be the thing that Aston needs to take a step back to somewhere less embarrassing, once he's come out of that little cave he seems to be hiding in at the moment. With so much turmoil already surrounding the team, Aston, and specifically Lawrence Stroll, came out with a statement, claiming, quote, "We do things differently here." Yeah, you can say that again. So we're at that point in the story where Jesus is dead, and a few days later he respawns from the gulag in a divine miracle. Only this is the real world, so that's not going to happen. On the bright side, Honda claim they've made improvements and have the goal of finishing the race. That statement not going down particularly well with seasoned motivational speaker Lance Stroll, who seemingly suggested the only way that was happening was if Aston applied that weird car swap thing Formula E used to do a few years ago. Funnily enough, Honda opted against the special livery in Japan, the team much preferring to quietly retire from this event instead. That didn't stop the rest of the grid. VCOP the first to reveal a Toyota tribute livery, which we won't complain about as this looks f***ing awesome. Toyota's actual team were planning a special look of their own, announcing a tie-in with the Godzilla franchise, then shocking the world with a paint job that actually looks really good. Godzilla's of course famous for knocking down towns and destroying high-rise buildings. Has keen to drive that point home by ending FP2 9th and 11th. Yet this posted its comments disabled for some reason. Championship leaders Mercedes were clearly excited about their season prospects, but a look of their new threads for Suzuka, this not Toto Wolff livery coming in partnership with a Japanese clothing brand, who seemingly dressed Kimi Antonelli up as that guy on an e-bike who stole my phone last week. Despite all the attention, I'm not quite sure Toto was all in on that idea.
Pose!
No messing around now.
Come, let's get this done.
Yeah, give me my phone back. Makes you wonder what other team principal liveries we could have. Maybe an Aston Martin one on Mike Crack. Actually, they're pretty arse already. That would more than ring true in first practice. Fernando Alonso taking advantage of his contract benefits by handing the wheelie bin to the hands of reserve driver Jack Crawford, who's probably the most excited person to drive that car ever. We should really be handing our congratulations to Nando here, who saw the birth of his son back on Thursday. Well, good to know at least someone in that team can finish in 2026. If you feel like I'm padding for time, that's because I am. As for the on-track action in Friday practice, there was all of it. Cars were struggling with spoon curve, championship leader George Russell, one of the first to make a mistake, before Osama Lindblad showed the Briton how to do it properly. Meanwhile, Williams were trying to understand their 2026 challenger, Flovis Paint, adorning the front of the FW48. Alex Albon wasn't much help. Then again, I'd be pissed off if they put that outside my factory as well. The tyre driver's been particularly critical of his 2026 car, though it's not really fair to take it out on the Cadillacs, is it? Didn't think it was socially acceptable to bully the slow people. In the end, it would be George Russell leading the way in FP1, Antonelli in the McLarens in hot pursuit, and the Papaya outfit would continue to threaten the Silver Arrows in the afternoon. Oscar Piastri on top at the end of Friday, with pace that turned out to be a massive lie, but Oscar fans could do with some good news at the moment. Piquet would see himself exercising extra caution when finding himself in the presence of Fraud Bon, who in turn caught a slow-moving Antonelli in the first sector.
What is that guy doing? It's dangerous.
And this isn't. Charles Leclerc's Ferrari looked like it was dealing with the symptoms of a Vindaloo in what actually happened to be one of his quali simulation runs. And we end our day with the familiar sights of a broken down Sergio Perez and VCARB learning from the Ferrari book of race engineering.
Yeah, what's going on?
We're checking. Everything looks good.
Okay, but it's not good. I mean, I've just got anti-stall on. Both times I've gone down a gear.
Mercedes were back on top for FP3, Antonelli ahead of Russell heading into qualifying. McLaren were another team to keep their Friday form alive. Lando Norris was on the blocks again. With the Briton having now used all 3 of his energy stores for the season, I'll just let that sink in. Ollie Behrman was told to get the Godzilla car some more screen time. The 87 machine subsequently designed to do this. Meanwhile at Cadillac, Bottas was faced with the unusual circumstance of having to overtake someone, which made him really angry for some reason. His teammate Perez found a much faster way to traverse the final chicane. It was time to head over to quali, where, as it turns out, Aston Martin can get even worse. Caddy were able to outqualify both of the wheelie bins this week, the real shock of Q1 being Oliver Behrman in the Haas, right after I predicted him to get a top 6 finish on the Talk Shift podcast earlier this week. That's aging well, isn't it? The final casualty of the session was Alex Albon, who was asking fans to pray for him on Japanese state television, and, well, now we know why. On to Q2 then, where Max Verstappen's 2026 season was about to get even better. The Dutchman took part in an endurance race on his weekend off, proceeding to dominate it before being disqualified for having used too many tyres. Now he was being outqualified by Hadjar and Lindblad, finishing the second session in the drop zone, and I'll tell you what, good thing Helmut Marko's dead, he'd be off to VCARB at this rate. Ocon, Hulkenberg, Lawson, Belgrano and Sainz would complete the drop zone as the remaining 10 looked to fight it out for pole. A pole Ferrari looked actually in the hunt for, well before Antonelli stopped playing with his food at the end of Q2. It would be a Mercedes battle once again then, one that Kimi Antonelli looked to have complete control over. 2 tenths up on Russell after the initial runs, while all Ferrari could do was watch as Leclerc showed off the handling prowess of a Tesco shopping trolley, and Hamilton took what the commentators described as the Hamilton line through the final corner, which is an interesting term for shit. It would all come down to the dying seconds then, only it wouldn't, as hardly anyone improved and Antonelli secured his P1 for Sunday. And we would get straight to that, only we've got a particularly big bellend to cover first. So F1 Twitter's been interesting this week. Cadillac fell foul of some awkward text cut-offs. McLaren fans are at it again, and the Formula 1 official account has just done something so monumentally dense, I can't quite get my head around it. Following qualifying for the Japanese Grand Prix, it's customary for the sport to release the onboard poll app onto social media, only this time, things were a bit different. The lap proceeds to cut away at certain points, notably through the famous 130R, where super clipping is at its worst, and the car engines sound like they're all about to die. This convenient cutaway has already pissed people off, so what did Formula 1 decide to do? Well, they decide to double down for some reason. Unfortunately, Kimi's onboard camera had a technical issue partway through his lap, meaning we were unable to bring you the lap on board in full. Okay, what the fuck? This problem was quickly resolved by fans, who spent little time in finding the original footage, where the only technical issue at play appears to be with the brain of the person who thought they'd get away with this shit. Breaking 130R to be renamed 130 Recharge. You bunch of lying twats. Reacting to me lying. You're so full of shit. F off, stop lying. Hezbollah for some reason. You know what? I've defended these technical regulations enough times, but when you do something like this, something so monumentally dense that light starts to even begin bending around you, I don't really know what to say anymore. Big thank you to this handsome chap for pointing this one out to me, and if you'd like to nominate the next Expelland of the week, use the hashtag on screen, tag me on the platform, or join the Discord server, and I promise I'll actually take one of your suggestions next time. Anyway, on to race day. Oh look, here's what happens when you're not very nice about the new regulations. I'd like to start Sunday's coverage with some news I was meant to cover earlier, but forgot because, well, I'm an idiot, but that's not a recent thing, is it? Max Verstappen had an interesting media day on Thursday, expelling a journalist from the interview room after recognising him as the one who gave him a stupid grin in Abu Dhabi.
Are you giving me a stupid grin now? I don't know.
Kit Kat have also revealed that 12 tons of their F1 chocolate have been stolen, and just to clear things up, no, that was not me. Anyway, it's race day, so let's get to the race. Only we can't, as someone let Tiger Woods compete in the Porsche support round for some reason. After a short delay, McLaren would surprise everyone. Oscar Piastri has just taken the start. He was also in the lead by turn 1, but I thought the first bit was more impressive. The Australian was a rocket off the line, jumping the two Mercedes as Antonelli stuck his difficulty on hard mode once again, dropping all the way back to 6th, but wasting little time in dispatching #washed on lap 2. While further back, Max Verstappen was coming to terms with actually having to battle with a teammate. Russell was another one on the fight back, getting past Norris for 3rd, while Piastri extended his lead out front. Made us think a win might just be possible, which was a bit thick to start preaching on lap 3, but what can you do? George was up another place one tour later, the Briton then requiring a whole 5 laps to whittle down Piastri's advantage and make the move at the end of lap 8. Oscar wasn't quite done yet, however, using his battery, well we assume anyway because the graphics are still a bit wank, to swoop back past into P1. Antonelli meanwhile had now made it past Norris, and not long after had dispatched Leclerc as well, even taking the time to show off his own impression of the Monegasque driving from earlier in the weekend. Piastri though was actually looking really good, able to build up a 1-second advantage and survive the pit stop stages. The only thing that really looked to be able to stop him was a poorly timed safety car, but what are the chances of that happening? Oh, never mind, apparently I'll just go myself then. Ollie Behrman and Franco Colapinto would kick off the second Falklands War when the Briton approached the Argentinian with so much closing speed you'd think the Alpine had a technical issue, until you checked your calendars and realised we're still in 2026. I get we got a month off now, but I suppose that's one way to avoid conscription. This hit with the barrier was apparently so big, not a single camera was able to catch it, leaving the Haas driver hobbling to the sidelines, and thus with a lengthy safety car as the air crash investigators were called out to remove all the debris. That was terrible news for anyone who just pitted, i.e. George Russell and Oscar Piastri. And as the McLaren fans started auditioning for next week's comedy review, Kimi Antonelli had just locked himself back into the lead. George's day would then get worse when he begged his teammate to, quote, do what they'd practiced on the restart, and either Antonelli didn't, or Russell was just shit anyway, as the Italian flew up the road as we went back to green, and Lewis Hamilton put himself past the 63 car and up into 3rd. Russell would soon reveal his particular love for the Ferrari rectum, as he seemingly allowed Leclerc past as well, allowing the Scuderia to play fight again and do little for Fred Vasseur's blood pressure. Despite pitting last of all these guys, it appeared Hamilton's tyres were worse for wear. The 44 driver bemused by the situation, though when you treat the final corner like this, I'm not wholly surprised.
Yeah, he needs to give the position.
Yeah, nice try, mate. Lando would eventually take that place back, albeit only momentarily, as #washed would soon return the favour at turn 1, and a similar situation was developing down in the battle for 3rd, Russell taking the place from Leclerc, only to be promptly embarrassed around the outside of the opening corner. No such issues though for Kimi Antonelli, who had quietly built a 14-second lead by this stage and just won the Japanese Grand Prix to become the youngest championship leader in the sport's history. Meanwhile, Bortoleto was observed taking out a Cadillac mechanic because apparently they haven't suffered enough. These sort of races I tend to quantify by how easy it was for me to doze off during them, and given I base this review almost solely off the highlights, that kind of tells you all you need to know, doesn't it? Now Suzuka isn't really known for its overtaking, and when we did get some action, it was pretty good, but that was few and far between, and really the whole Grand Prix has kind of been overshadowed by Behrman's massive off, the crash acting as a huge I told you so moment for the FIA, who attempted to resolve the situation by putting out some words on social media. Fair to say that's not gone down very well. Returning to the championship though, and where does this leave George Russell? Well, that at least sorts my content schedule for the rest of the week, so get subscribed for that one. I'll be back soon anyway with IndyCar's coverage at Barber, and judging by what we've already seen from that weekend, you're not going to want to miss that too. Patrons and members of course get early access previews to all that, plus some exclusive content as well. So if you want to get involved, links are all down in the description for you. While you're at it, a like and subscribe would go a long way. I've slacked off the regulations in this one, so don't expect it to be on YouTube for much longer. 200k is creeping closer and closer, so thanks for all the support already at the start of the year. I'll be back soon with another video, but until then, you know what to do. F off. So YouTube do this new thing now where they give creators these AI overviews of our comment section. Basically, in a bid to supposedly improve our mental health, why have me read hundreds upon hundreds of fat comments when I could just have them all boiled down into one big one from presumably Gemini here? Anyway, there are some benefits. For instance, when I'm making those classic comedy reviews and I want to know what races you want to see in the future. So right now I can see we've got multiple requests for Spa 1998, USA 2005 and Japan 2014. What the fuck's wrong with you all?
That's rude.
Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to the Comedy Review, the show whose host is in denial about his weight about as much as Stefano Domenicali's in denial about how terrible the 2026 rules are. See, maybe this is why those AI overview things aren't such a bad idea. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport. Things like this. Aston Martin get their priorities straight by testing whatever this is. Red Bull upgrades put their car on rails. And this Sky Sports cameraman gets ever so slightly distracted. Really hope these McLaren mechanics are single as well. Most importantly, this is of course the end of 5 weeks without Formula One. It turns out not even that's enough to get people excited for Miami. It's been a long Easter break, and one that, as we'll see later, has turned the normally ever so slightly unhinged F1 fanbase into rabid animals, but maybe none so more than big boss Stefano Domenicali. Our supreme leader held a press conference over the break, claiming Formula One is perfectly fine, the fans love the sport, and absolutely nothing is wrong, seemingly forgetting the next event on his calendar was the crisis talks about how to fix this shit show of a regulation cycle. Domenicali's comments were met by, well, mass confusion, as we all started to wonder if he was simply spending his month off having a competition with Mohammed Ben Sulayem over who could be the most single brain-celled, mouth-breathing, tone-deaf cunt. The sport now returns with several big changes in place, energy deployment culled once again in a bid to bring an end to super clipping, along with further reforms to the way active aero and boost mode will work. Formula One finally coming to the realisation that mass closing speeds and the need to have an air crash investigation team on standby every weekend might not be the best thing for their PR department. As FOM went on to reassure fans and prove that not everything has changed by striking down several of my fellow content creators, we've got some news on the engine front as well. The Miami race now marks a pivotal landmark for manufacturers and how much they'll be able to upgrade their power units for the remainder of the season. An ADIO system, you can go to the race to find out what that means, being put in place to reward those who are a bit shit over the winter with more development time. From that, you suspect Mercedes get told to shut up shop and Honda get handed their technical drawings 2007 style. But apparently, according to the FIA, it's Red Bull who are the fastest out there, the team who have, let me just check, 0 podiums and went out in Q2 in Japan. This means Mercedes will now get a chance to make their car even faster, which is great for our championship hopes. Meanwhile, the Red Bull news gets worse. The stories broke over the Middle East break that Max Verstappen's race engineer, Gianpiero Lambiase, is set to be absorbed by Zach Brown. Oh, and one of Miami's homeless is seemingly pissed over the V-Carbo 3 as well. In a daring PR move, the team have tried to pass this off as a new special livery, promoting one of their new citrus flavours. Though, how we can go from this to this in the space of one race weekend, I do not understand. Cadillac were another team sporting a new look for their first home race of the year, so that'll be nice to see a couple of times in Q1. Meanwhile, Mercedes revealed their new sponsorship with Premier Inn in the form of these purple race suits. Quite fitting given their current performances have given me some of the best sleep I've had in ages. Now we've got a sprint in Miami, which means we get to watch 2 processions this weekend, and are left with just a singular practice session, which was extended to 90 minutes for drivers to shake all their rust off. It was no surprise then to see a whole raft of new upgrades hit the track in this session, almost everyone bringing brand new bits to their 2026 designs. Almost everyone. Mercedes were holding off on their upgrades as they think they've got enough of a buffer to the pack behind. As we wait to see that age badly, we can take a long hard look at Aston Martin, who have brought nothing to Miami, making you wonder, what's the point anymore? On track, Kimi Antonelli was the first to encounter Lance Stroll, who's preparing for his role as turn number 20 on this layout. The Italian compensating for this by ignoring the 14-15 complex entirely later on in the session. Sorry, this has literally just come through now. I've had an email from Boss with a photo of Lance Stroll and the caption, "Set the standard." Back to FP1, and George Russell was still trying to remember what way the circuit went. Lewis Hamilton another to go off at turn 1. The 7-time world champion hasn't shut up about how hard he's worked over the last 33 days, which I'm sure has no relation to these images of him and Kim Kardashian in her natural habitat. That was a really good plastic in the sea joke, by the way. Another one for the news section now was Audi signed their new racing director and former Formula One backmarker Alan McNish. Hulkenberg and Bortoletto quick to show off to the Scotsman just how good they were at navigating Miami's runoff. On the other end of the table, Charles Leclerc were going to sprint qualifying fastest, Antonelli and Russell on the back foot in 5th and 6th. Thankfully, their misplaced confidence was about to be drowned out by something far more startling. Well, if we're going to talk about bad news, we may as well start with Aston Martin. Lance Stroll couldn't complete a single lap in SQ1 before pulling over and stopping for some reason. The Canadian receiving no sympathy from the Belgian F1 commentators, translated as saying, "Here's Lance Stroll, telling himself I did enough for today. I did a little spin, complained about F1 yesterday, and now I'm going home." Fernando Alonso wasn't faring much better, his first lap outside of the 107% rule and 12.5 seconds off the pace. His second outside the confines of the circuit, leaving us in a situation where not only do these guys find themselves on the back of the F1 grid, they would have started from the rear of the Formula 2 field as well. Aston reserve Mary Boyer was literally the fastest Aston Martin driver on Friday. As we tried to come to terms with what had just happened, the rest of SQ1 was proceeding as normal. The Astons, joined by the Cadillac pair as Ocon and Slowson became surprise further additions to the drop zone. That meant both Williams had made it through, and thus there was only 4 remaining places for those hoping to be eliminated in SQ2. They would fall to the remaining V-Carb and Haas of Lindblad and Behrman as the Audis entered their days 11th and 12th, the remaining 5 constructors battling it out for sprint pole. That had not looked the comfortable sprint pole that Mercedes had expected coming into the weekend, Ferrari and McLaren arguably stealing the show, and while some are crying sandbagging, I think Toto Wolff's face seems to suggest a different story. George Russell was actually the fastest in all 3 sectors in SQ3, which probably had something to do with the fact that at this point he was the only one to have set a lap time, a time that was quickly eclipsed by Lando Norris in the McLaren, the 63-man only able to watch as he dropped further and further down the order. The Briton would end up 6th as Lando's time looked more and more indomitable at the front. Piastri would make it a brief McLaren front row lockout, only to have that split by the other Mercedes of Antonelli, meaning it may as well still be a McLaren 1-2 as the Italian will be 9th by turn 1 anyway. This really wasn't the session the Silvereros had expected, and as their confidence started to wane, matters were only about to get worse.
Sweeping through to this triple left-hander, 6-7.
Oh, f*** off, Jolien. F1 posted this tweet asking if we were ready for another thrilling sprint around Miami, featuring an image reminding us Cadillac still had that new livery, and a second of Arvid Lindblad, who ironically wasn't ready at all, failing to even make it out of the garage ahead of this one. The Briton wouldn't be the only casualty ahead of lights out. Hulkenberg's Audi on its period in the garage, maybe a slight warning it was about to identify as a bonfire on its way to the grid, leaving us with just 20 drivers as the 5 lights went out. As expected, Norris would get off the line and Antonelli wouldn't, spending the first sequence of corners on damage control as the one car streaked away, and we got a 2021 rematch as Hamilton and Verstappen went toe-to-toe and somehow didn't kill one another. Leclerc would soon get past Antonelli as well, complaining anyway, as that's all he seems to be able to do these days. Meanwhile, in a first for its kind, a Cadillac had just passed someone on pure pace, and it wasn't an Aston Martin. They were far too far back at this stage. Some championship permutations now, as Russell saw an opportunity to get past his teammate on lap 7, holding that place for a grand total of 30 seconds before the Italian was able to swoop back by, which we all missed because Mummy and Daddy were fighting again. Verstappen had passed Hamilton completely off the track and now had to give that position back, the 44 car hesitant to do so given what went down last time that happened. I hope you enjoyed that flurry of overtaking, as that's about all she wrote for that one. The rest of this race spent watching bits of Esteban Ocon make a bid for freedom and hoping that one might just end up on the racing line enough to warrant a safety car and give us something more interesting to look at. It appears these new changes to the regs have removed super clipping, but also overtaking. Well, at least Formula 1 fans will be happy now. Let's at least look on the bright side. Franco Colapinto was having one of his best races in Formula 1. He was still out of the points, but hey, credit where credit's due. Lando Norris would dominate Saturday morning then to take the sprint win. Piastri holding on to second as Leclerc's late challenge was halted by his own incompetence. Speaking of, Kimi Antonelli would lose 2 positions thanks to a track limits penalty, and Gabriel Bortoleto was disqualified, losing 100% of his 0 points picked up so far in the weekend. So as we all psyched ourselves up to do that all over again, it's time to look at our Expellend of the week, where I get to talk about woman. F1 Twitter have been particularly brain dead this week, from commemorating Senna's death through AI videos of him getting out of the car to discovering light exists, which in fairness is quite impressive given they're usually so dense it tends to bend around them. Yeah, I think I've used that one before, but who cares? I think it works even better in this context. Now, unfortunately, our Bellend candidate this week has since deleted their qualifying submission. Unfortunately for them, I've recently discovered this newfangled device called a screenshot button. This is Alicia, whose profile says she's long-suffering, not sure if that's in relation to her or the poor souls who decided to click that follow button. You see, a few weeks ago, we got a very powerful moment in Formula 1. F1 Academy champion Dorian Pan getting behind a Mercedes Formula 1 car for the first time, marking the first time a woman has done so for the team. And I'm picking my vocabulary very carefully here. I, of course, was cancelled last year and received literal death threats for using the word fangirls in a tweet, and now it appears the term female's off limits as well. The moment Dorian Pan has always dreamed of, as she becomes the first female to ever drive a Mercedes F1 car. This is where good old Alicia decides to open her hole. Using female to refer to a woman is so incredibly dehumanizing. Yeah, this is why we can't have nice things. The more sane reaction was, as you would expect, I wish I had your problems if this is what you have to worry about. Go touch some grass. Piss off, you wet wipe. Should we call her the first XX chromosome pair to ever drive a Mercedes F1 car? Or maybe, as this person points out, just the first driver girly. Alicia here has no qualms with that phrasing by the looks of things. The truly sad thing here is it takes away from the actual achievement itself. So, well done, Alicia. I hope you're happy with yourself. Anyway, thanks to this guy for the recommendation, and if you'd like to nominate the next X-Bellend of the week, use the hashtag on screen, tag me on the platform, or join the Discord server. Now, sprint's over, so it's time we do this all over again. Oh look, a pit lane girly. McLaren were hoping for a nice repeat on Saturday afternoon, but early on in Q1, it did look like that was going to happen. Piastri only just escaping the drop zone in 16th, as Bortoleto and Lindblad joined the usual candidates once again, left on the sidelines for the rest of the day. Big shout out to Fernando Alonso for this crash out on his way back to the pits. Hey, at least he's faster than F2 this time. A couple of new names that made it into the second session this time around, though it would be the same 10 who progressed into the final shootout to cap off Saturday's action. Ferrari, McLaren, Red Bull and Mercedes about to battle it out to see who starts in the front, and also Alpine there for the vibes, I guess. Team Papaya was still hunting for their form out there though, the pair beaten by Verstappen, then Leclerc, then Antonelli at the start of Q3. A thrilling start to the final session then. I hope you enjoyed it, as we're never going to see that again. Only Verstappen could improve on the final runs, putting his Red Bull onto the front row, as Antonelli solidified his hat-trick of poles in his Mercedes. Converting that into a win was going to be easier said than done, however. Not only did he now have his start to contend with, the weather was looking a little bit shit as well. Threats of thunderstorms loomed over the Miami venue on Sunday, F1 deciding to bring the event 3 hours forward in the hope to avoid a third successive cancellation in 2026. In better news, Ben Sulayem just spawned in to tell us the V8s are apparently coming back, and the engine manufacturers will have no say on that at all. Doesn't sound like a recipe for disaster now, does it? While a lovely window of sunshine was found for the Grand Prix, poor Formula 2 weren't so lucky. Ample time to plug the comedy review for that series, coming exclusively to members and patrons tomorrow. Links down in the description if you want to find out more. Isaac Hadjar would start for the pit lane after the FIA found one of his side boobs was too big. For the remaining 21, it was time for lights out, as Antonelli had a flying start. For his standards, the Italian still plummeted through the field like a stone though. That gave Leclerc and Verstappen the advantage, the Dutchman apparently scared by the might of the glue factory as he spun on his own down at the exit of turn 1 in what was praised as a fantastic loss of control by Sky Sports. Amazed Martin Brundle even got that out whilst being balls deep in the Red Bull driver's cock. Leclerc led then with Antonelli on the recovery drive, while the battling wasn't over further back. The resumption of the Falklands War, seeing Hamilton limping home on half a barge board, the Miami stewards deeming this appropriate as retaliation for the UK not helping them enough in the Iran war. Kimi meanwhile had caught up with Leclerc's prostate and soon was back into the lead. Any thoughts of the Italian now running away with his third consecutive victory, however, were quickly put to bed when the Ferrari driver made it back ahead. Further down the field, Isaac Hadjar was making good progress until he drove straight into the wall at the chicane for some reason and spent the rest of his Saturday having a boxing match with his RB22. Incredibly, the safety car wasn't called out for this, handing Lawson the notion it was okay to table flip Pierre Gasly. Nico Hulkenberg took this as an opportunity to join the retirement club as well, in what was remarkably still massively better than his performance in the sprint. Leclerc leading the field back to green as Russell forgot to switch out of safety car mode and handed P4 to Piastri, which is apparently all the team's fault. The other McLaren was on the move too. Norris had got past Antonelli whilst the Miami stewards had been busy fingering each other's arseholes. Now he was ahead of Leclerc as well, as a shit day got even worse for Max Verstappen, being done for crossing the pit exit line, which apparently has to wait till after the Grand Prix to be all sorted out, which makes about as much sense as anything that's come out of Stefano's crack these days. The race was settling down at this stage. Perfect time for maybe some of that aforementioned rain to come along. The jury was still out on when, or even if, it would arrive. McLaren seemed to think it would be 20 laps. Cadillac, meanwhile, expected it in 2. Ferrari and Mercedes thought rain was imminent, though still designed to pit their drivers onto the hard compound anyway. Leclerc suffered a slow stop on the front end with this one, leaving him behind Russell on pit exit. I think you'll all agree that's another for the counter on that one. As the Scuderia pit wall conveniently lost the ability to speak to Charles on the radio, it had started to rain, but apparently not enough to deter Merck from pitting the other car of Kimi Antonelli. McLaren would respond 1 lap later, but the undercut saw the 12 car get ahead and into the effective race lead. Wait, hang on a second, how did Verstappen get here? The Dutchman had of course pitted far earlier in this one, and that was apparent when Antonelli shot by on lap 29. Norris spending a bit longer admiring the Dutchman's rear end, which appeared on the live feed earlier in the weekend, and quite frankly, I'm struggling to blame him. Still, could be worse. Valtteri Bottas was already last, and now being done for speeding through the pit lane, the FIA bringing him back in for a drive-through to show he could do it properly. Russell and Piastri were scrapping over P5 at this stage. Meanwhile, Kimi Antonelli was taking the Max Verstappen approach of coming up with problems with his car just before setting some of the fastest laps of the race. At the same time, Leclerc was still trying to fight back and get past Verstappen for third. The Dutchman on 40-year-old tyres, though still making the move, easier said than done. The Red Bull was now at the mercy of Piastri, who made it by on lap 48 and set after Leclerc for the podium. That would come on the penultimate lap, Piastri getting by Leclerc in what appeared to be an almighty mistake from the Monegasque, who thought he'd completed the Grand Prix and started doing celebratory donuts down at turn 3. That left the 16 car with suspension damage on the actual final lap, dropping in behind Russell and Verstappen at the last corner as Antonelli came across the line to take win number 3 on the trot and further extend his championship lead. Norris and Piastri completed the podium in what, I'll be honest, I thought was going to be an anticlimax of a race, but in reality, this one kind of delivered, which is rare for Miami. The first half was pretty damn good and possibly some of the best racing we've seen around Miami, but after that, the last couple of laps aside, it did feel like we were getting cock-teased by Sky Sports that supposed threat of rain, which came down like a motherfucker after the race because of course it did. That final injection of drama brought this one back for me though, and there's still a chance for some change in the final result. Verstappen and Russell both under investigation as I'm recording this video. Guess that's just the price you pay for me having no life and getting this out to you so quickly. Still, let me know what you thought of this one down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the comedy review, drop it a like and get subscribed, as F1's finally back and the mid-season slop is finally over. Well, we have got 2 weeks, but the mid-season slop is almost over. Big thank you to the members and patrons as well. They got an early preview to this one, already have access to my next video on Lance Stroll, and we'll be getting that exclusive F2 comedy review on Monday. All the more reason to check it out then if you want to further support the channel by heading over to the links in the description below. I'll be back soon with another video. Until then, actually I'm going to bring you in personally for this one. Off. Should we get to bold predictions then? You said Russell gets angry about luck. I've just channeled my inner Latifi and said a groundhog's gonna die. Trust this to be the first time this year something I say comes true.
That's rude.
Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to the Comedy Review, the show that's faster than... yeah, Aston Martin. That's good. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport. Things like this. Gary the Groundhog is spotted out on circuit. Some geese are spotted out on circuit. And Alex Albon is spotted out on Gary, no! More on Flat Gary in a minute. First, we start with this. George Russell came into this season as hot favourite for the title this year. Now he's playing second fiddle to Kimi Antonelli, and that's apparently his mum's fault for not shagging sooner. The Briton divided audiences after the Miami Grand Prix, boldly claiming that had he got to Formula 1 5 years earlier, he'd have multiple world titles by now, suggesting he could have beaten prime Lewis Hamilton, all while he trails points to a little fetus who still can count his own pubes. Elsewhere in the news, it's retirement talk time. Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, Fernando Alonso and now Esteban Ocon firmly in the limelight heading into this weekend. All 4 drivers are arguably at least in the second half of their careers, although seemed equally surprised by the recent media storm coming into this one, particularly baffling for Verstappen considering he's proudly displayed whatever the motorsport version of Tinder is on his lock screen at this point. Apparently he's staying now, whilst Hamilton has a contract to the end of 2027. Fernando wants his son to remember him driving, and Ocon just addressed the news slightly more bluntly by calling it complete and utter bullshit. That did little to quell the growing rumours of a feud between him and team boss Ayo Komatsu, Yuki Tsunoda, and now even Jack Doohan in the running to replace Labaguette as early as midway through the 2026 season. Presumably, given we're now past the Japanese Grand Prix, the Australians considered a safe pair of hands. Our next bit of news revolves around engines. Formula 1 finally discovering that the regs we've all been calling shit for years have turned out to be, oh, shit. Who could have seen that one coming? An emergency adjustment is set to reduce the proportion of electrical power from 50 to 40% for 2027, whilst Doofenshmirtz here has been screaming from the rooftops that the sport will return to V8s at the end of the decade. Potentially the first time anything he said has gone down well. In fact, it's been a particularly notable 2 weeks for F1's villains, as Christian Horner's been back in the news. The ex-Red Bull team boss was finally spotted out in the wild this week, assuming no one was watching the Formula E, though at least was going to great lengths to keep his hands well away from any of the women interviewing him. The Britons filled the headlines with rumours he may buy a significant stake in Alpine, part of a whole palaver where the Wolfmeister wants them instead, only that's also pissed off Fatty here, who doesn't like the idea of F1 teams having friends. Horner's other option then is to enter Formula 1 with a brand new 12th outfit, which is where Chinese manufacturer BYD come in. Build Your Dreams don't seem to care that F1's about to ditch the vast majority of its electrical power, and now looks to enter the sport with Horner a key figure in their management structure. This is where I have so many good jokes about China, but, I'm not a f***ing idiot, am I? It's another sprint weekend this time out, plus we've got a whole batch of new upgrades to look at, so now's really not the time to start throwing cars into the concrete Montreal walls, presumably why V-Carb opted to shut Liam Lawson's machine down before we even got that far. That caused the first of many red flags, which made me glad we don't use this meme during practice sessions. The McLaren drivers have new helmets this weekend, Oscar Piastri selling laptops and Lando Norris supporting the race against dementia, though ironically spending most of first practice forgetting which way the circuit went. Meanwhile, we get our second red flag when Gary here decided he wanted to become 2D, and in turn wreck any chances of Alex Albon taking part in sprint qualifying. And when we returned to racing action, it didn't look like we were going to stay that way for very long. Russell almost bringing the session to a halt once again after deciding his new Mercedes parts needed additional crash testing. As I said, no red for that, so here's Esteban Ocon still trying to prove he's a competent F1 driver. And here's Esteban Ocon failing to drive in a straight line. A very disrupted session then left Antonelli at the top of the table from Russell and the Ferrari duo of Hamilton and Leclerc behind. Fernando Alonso a surprise in the top 10 for Aston Martin, so I wonder if that will translate into pace for sprint qualifying. Hang on a minute, I recognise that theme tune. This could only mean good things, can't it? And initially, they were. Fernando Alonso going P14 at the beginning of SQ1, only the Spaniard was about to find a rather unique way of staying there. Alonso spent the start of this weekend saying he wanted to remain in Formula 1 until his son can remember his driving, but he's glad he's too young to remember that. Anyway, I guess we can't avoid it this time, can we? As Fernando upgraded his Aston Martin for the FIA medical car, we were left with a tantalising prospect for the end of SQ1. Liam Lawson's car was still pissing itself with hydraulic fluid, and Williams was still continuing to clean Gary out of the inside of Alex Albon's machine. That suddenly left a massive opportunity for the remaining Aston of Stroll and the Cadillac outfit, who were rather off-put by the timing of the red, Valtteri Bottas losing what they called a mega lap. But they were very quick to change the subject when asked if it would get him out of the drop zone. We waited with bated breath then as the track went back to green and, well, nothing happened. That was sure worth the wait, wasn't it? Many of those that attempted to set a lap failed to get round quick enough to even start one, leaving Pierre Gasly the surprise elimination, but Fernando into SQ2. Shame his car only has 3 wheels left on it, I guess. That meant there were 5 remaining spots in the drop zone for the second part of quali, and even more drama as Max Verstappen was now on the bubble. As Red Bull prepared by bubble wrapping the garage, they could at least breathe a sigh of relief as the challenging pack seemed far more interested in P10. Bortoletto bumped by teammate Hulkenberg, who in turn was displaced by the Williams of Sainz at the flag. Joining the Audis were Colapinto and the Haas pair as the remaining 10 drivers got ready for the fight for pole. Or more realistically, the fight for third. Mercedes were rather running away with this one. No one looked more dominant than George Russell, who took provisional pole as the times tumbled behind. Antonelli and Norris, the big losers, finding themselves out of position in 3rd and 9th respectively. And despite there being 2 minutes left on the clock, that looked to be the end of proceedings. Well, until this graphic popped up all of a sudden. Lewis Hamilton was flying on tyres that had already received their post-mortem by this stage. Only the 44 car was about to bottle the hairpin and throw that all away. And unfortunately for him, there were more cars on faster laps behind. The order was about to shift once again, with Antonelli returning to the front row, and McLaren finally pulling their fingers out of their asses to secure the next 2 spots on the grid. The Ferraris and Red Bulls would line up 2 by 2 after that, Lindblad and Sainz completing the top 10, as we went into Saturday with so much optimism and excitement. Nah, just kidding, Super Clipping was back once again. Saturday morning brought an update to the independent teams controversy, Fatty's plea to prevent outfits from ganging up on him, finding a strange pillar of support in Red Bull of all people, who've seemingly forgotten that they're the worst perpetrators of this in the first place. It's the equivalent of HMRC sending rocket-powered Mohawk a birthday card. Besides that, all the talk was about the sprint. More specifically, who was starting it from the pit lane. Albon, Bottas, Gasly and Behrman would all remove themselves from the grid, with Stroll soon joining that list after a suspension problem almost took him out of proceedings altogether. The Canadian was investigated for a start infringement for this, albeit let off, presumably because he's been driving that Aston all year and thus already suffered enough. For the remaining 17, the lights would go out and George Russell would hold his lead into turn 1. Slightly further back, Oscar Piastri was surprised by the competence of Lewis Hamilton. As they squabbled with Norris for third, at the front it was becoming a two-horse race, Antonelli clinging to Russell's prostate as the pair built up a 3-second lead, only to throw that all away when they clashed at turn 1 on lap 5. I completely forgot about that counter. That prompted Antonelli to other than truly lose his head, going on the hunt to find it again down at turn 8 and promoting Norris up to second, which I'm sure made Pubes even happier. As Daddy Toto spanked the Italian over team radio, everything was looking rather nice and rosy for leader Russell, until the dementia helmet got ever so slightly too big in the Britain's mirrors, Lando Norris on the charge, and Hungary for a second sprint win in a row. That gave us a thrilling 20-lap battle that was great to watch, particularly impressive considering nothing actually happened in that space of time. It was simply a case of waiting around and manifesting it being 2025 again, that paying off from the penultimate tour when Norris bottled the hairpin and gave a recovering Antonelli a shot at making this a Mercedes 1-2, only to instead revert to his favourite line around turn 1 again. At the same time, Piastri was giving Hamilton the guided tour of the Wall of Champions, shuffling the Briton back behind teammate Leclerc for the final lap, which was a much more calm affair for the Mercedes of George Russell, the 63 car crossing the line to inch slightly closer to Antonelli in the standings and get his season back on track. Shout-outs for this one have got to go to Lindblad for P8 in the V-car, and also Sergio Perez for dragging his Cadillac as high as P11 for all of 5 seconds before we realised he'd only got there by straight-lining every corner he could. It was time then to take a breath, reset, and do this all over again. Qualifying up next in the afternoon, Lance Stroll taking the opportunity to show teammate Alonso how to f*** up turn 3 properly. Hats off to Fernando for keeping it out of the wall. Couldn't keep it out of the drop zone, however, as he joined the usual candidates of Stroll and the Cadillacs, which I've just realised sounds like a really shit band name, Ocon and Albon making up the bottom 6. Isaac Hadjar would spring a surprise as he went top of the times in Q2, which we all missed as we were far too invested in how on earth this was going on slightly further back. The Argentine was able to hold on to scrape into Q3, as the Audis, Lawson, Gasly, Sainz and Behrman failed to progress any further. That set up a tight top 10 shootout where, unlike the day before, Mercedes might actually have to try this time round. Norris would set the early pace from Hamilton as Russell was busy fingering himself in the middle sector. That would give him everything to do on his flying lap, as Antonelli could only muster 4th in the second Silver Arrows. The Fourth Reich had got their act together by the closing minutes, Kimi able to move up into a provisional pole, celebrated by means of explosive diarrhea across the finish line. George Russell was flying, however, pulling a lap out of nowhere to go 700ths quicker than his championship rival and set up a thrilling scrap for Sunday. We'll get to that in a minute, but first up, it's time for our ex-Bell End of the Week. Lando Norris's dementia helmet carries many benefits this weekend. Not only does it raise awareness, but it also teaches McLaren fans what their brain would look like if they had one. Case in point, this bell end. If this looks familiar, it's because the clinically insane portion of the Norris fandom have posted similar content before. Only Carl Lando here decided to go one step further and get Oscar Piastri's mum involved. How will you feel when Oscar crashes and dies at Nicole Piastri? Okay, right, the abhorrent comment aside, he can't even spell dies right, the senile fuck. Funnily enough, this post didn't remain up on the platform for very long, though not before enough screenshots were taken, and Carl Lando was promptly castrated by the rest of the community. I hope you die a slow and painful death. Calm down, you fucking wetbag. Well, for starters, if he crashes and dies, I wonder what colour he'll change to. Thanks to those who made me aware of this arsehole, and if you'd like to nominate the next McLaren Bell End of the Week, you can use the hashtag on screen, tag me on the platform, or join the Discord server. Now, time for the Canadian Grand Prix. Oh look, my predictions come true again. Sunday promised us rain, action and a race-long fight between the two Mercedes drivers. In the end, we got none of that, but we did get Stroll handing some random woman an award for some reason. After Formula 2 proved the future of Formula 1 was in safe hands, the track was bone dry for the start, everyone starting the race on slicks, apart from McLaren, who'd seemingly opted to let their fan base dictate their strategy for this weekend. From there, if you were a fan of formation laps, well, maybe this was the race for you. There was confusion in our first attempt at the start, as Arvid Lindblad's car killed itself on the grid, forcing the field to go around once again. Formula 1 for the second time in 2 race weekends, cursing Lindblad over on Twitter before the race had even begun. With potentially the most exciting lap of 2026 so far now under our belt, the stewards thought, why not do it again? The race getting away at the third time of asking, the Mercs getting off the line so badly, Norris on intermediates had enough grip to take over the lead. After 2 laps though, the fan behind the call for wets had already been taken outside and shot, both McLarens having to pit for dries and tumbling down to the back of the field. That put the Mercs back into the race lead, meaning utter drama was about to ensue. Russell was able to snatch P1 back from his teammate, though spent the next few laps being paid by Formula 1 over how much he was able to increase their viewing figures. The Briton experimented with several lines through the turn 10 chicane, Antonelli responding with his own approach straight through Russell's rectum. Further behind, McLaren's day was getting worse, Oscar Piastri seeing a gap and then making another one right in the side of Alexander Albon. With the tyre driver out and Oscar facing a penalty, Mercedes were now fearing a similar situation developing in the battle for the lead. Radio messages were relayed to both drivers, telling them to stop trying to kill each other, and when that didn't work, Russell's car was just mysteriously shut off instead. As he quite literally threw his toys out of the pram, Kimi Antonelli was able to sail right up the road. You see, it was only a virtual safety car for some reason, the FIA seemingly concerned about paying Bernd Maylander overtime following everything that had happened in Formula 2. We go back to racing with attention turning to Isaac Hadjar, the second Red Bull running in the top 4 for the first time in most McLaren fans' lifetimes, and very eager to stay there, even if it meant murdering Charles Leclerc in the process. He'd be handed the penalty for the incident, as Lando Norris's dementia sponsorship took yet another new level, the world champion's gearbox forgetting how to gearbox anymore. That left another car out at the chicane, as Sergio Perez was getting racy with the leaders. Unfortunately, he too had forgotten that he was 2 laps down at this stage. Generating some actions, of course not allowed in this one however, the Mexican promptly assassinated a few laps later as his front right suspension gave way at 2/3 distance. On the bright side, this Marshall just won my diver of the day. Sorry, that was fucking awful. With any hope of a lead battle sat with a timeout on the naughty step, we had the choice of watching Lewis Hamilton versus Max Verstappen in the fight for P2, or Gasly versus one of the V-Cops. I wonder which one we're going to choose. The Dutchman was running a season-high second, that the 7-time champ behind had finally remembered how to drive an F1 car again, eventually making the move with 6 to go down at turn 1, nearly shitting himself by his own admission after the Grand Prix. There'd be no stopping Kimi Antonelli, however, who became the first driver to win his first 4 races on the trot and extend his championship lead to 40-something points at this stage. I'd say it's over, but I'm not making that mistake again. This could mark a significant shift in the title chase, however. Russell firmly on the back foot and really in need for some good fortune at the next round in Monaco. Yeah, good luck, mate. A race of 2 halves then, though one I feel could have gone down so much better had we not just come off the closest Indy 500 finish in history while they were still trying to get this one started. That comedy review comes your way tomorrow, with members and patrons already getting an exclusive preview to that, plus coverage of the Formula 2 and Weenie 500 race weekend. It's honestly the best way to support the channel, so if you can, the links are down in the description below for you to find out more. In the meantime, a like and subscribe on this video would still go a long way. That 200k is so tantalisingly close now, and I'd like to thank you all for the support already over this season. It continues in the Principality in a fortnight's time. Until then, you know what to do. F*** off.
And he cannot deal with adversity. Whenever anything is not going his way, he lashes out with unnecessary anger and borderline violence.
Yeah, I bet he's probably regretting that now, isn't he?
That's rude.
Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to the Comedy Review, the show whose absence improved YouTube in its entirety. Alright, piss off then. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport. Things like this. Kim Kardashian is here. Kim Kardashian is here. And Kim Kardashian is... Look, I get Monaco's f***ing boring, but come on already. Thankfully, F1's annual Last to Fall Asleep challenge gave us plenty to talk about. Starting with this. Plenty of news to cover from these last 2 weeks, but we're starting with Alpine, and for once, it's not because they've fired somebody. Instead, it's been announced that the Enstone outfit will partner with clothing giant Gucci, meaning if you really want to support the French, you can now look like a Belen too, just in case you didn't think you looked enough of one already. The deal will net the team roughly $150 million over 3 years, and with any luck, bring the black and gold colours back to the grid, along with Gucci red and green and Alpine blue. Actually, this is going to look like a right mess, isn't it? Elsewhere in the news, Valtteri Bottas needs to pull his finger out of his arse. Yeah, apparently that's the theme for his latest naked calendar. The Finn has been off the pace for the last few races, teammate Sergio Perez leading the way in the battle of mid, while rumours now begin to swirl over Valtteri's immediate future. The tabloids have been touting Colton Herta as a possible replacement, potentially even as soon as the next Grand Prix, which more or less just sums up how valid these claims are, Valtteri Bottas being a bit more blunt in his response. He just called them bullshit. Finally, Charles Leclerc has come out this week and revealed to the world his struggles with mental health by means of signing yet another long-term extension with the Scuderia. Leclerc's future was one of the lingering questions of the 2027 driver market, with speculation pre-season suggesting a shock move to Aston Martin may be on the cards. Yeah, funny enough, not heard much on that recently. Now though, a deal's been struck to see Charles remain in red for another few years to come. Some saying to the end of 2028, others to the end of the decade, and a few suggesting Ferrari will still be parading his decomposing corpse around the Monaco walls 100 years from now. Let's just see how he gets on in first practice. Let's start padding for time then by showcasing a few of the Monaco special liveries hitting the track this weekend. Aston Martin revealing this amazing bronze look, only for their reveal trailer to slowly make the car look worse as it went along. What we were left with was what looked like anal gone wrong, or as some described, a turd that's been rolled in glitter, which kind of sums Aston Martin up if I'm being honest. Equally disappointing was McLaren's take on their special 1000 GP livery, which actually marks their 999th after the team was so incompetent back in China this year. Now granted, this car looks far better on track than it does in these initial renders, but on a weekend where we all wanted a return to a classic look, and where across the pond Penske added this beast to my wank bank, yeah, that's just a tad underwhelming, I'm not gonna lie. With Audi topping the special liveries off with an all-yellow look, no, I don't understand it either, there were more developments across the pit lane catching the public's eye. Straight line mode has been banned for this year's race in the bid to not end up with a car in the harbour, and that's allowed teams to repurpose the system to show some lovely park bench design ideas. These were last-minute parts, rapidly designed, developed and installed within 48 hours, so it was really important for the drivers to look after them and not put their cars in the wall in first practice. See, a bit like that. Isaac Hadjar brought out the first red flag of the weekend when he turned right for the swimming pool section, then forgot to turn left again. Lando Norris would almost do the same thing, while teammate Oscar Piastri spent FP1 practicing his sign language. This one meaning get the f*** out of my way next time, you useless piece of shit. Tempers continued to flare as the opening hour went on, the Haas duo falling out after Le Baguette found Behrman in his way on 2 successive fast laps. Well, laps. This was Haas and Ocon after all. We then end the session with a final red flag, Fernando Alonso re-adding the brown to the rear of his Aston Martin with what was described as a mega save by Formula 1, and by everyone else as a crash into the wall. Also exploring the runoff with a Ferrari pair, Lewis Hamilton thinking with his other head and clearly trying to impress Kardashian with his late braking. The Briton also spotted with a new pink helmet design coming into the weekend, clearly taking offence to Max Verstappen describing him as a fried egg earlier on Thursday. P2 for the 7-time champion as teammate Leclerc entered FP1 on top, which turns out is quite easy to do when you realise you can just straight line the chicane. Those positions would reverse though for FP2, as McLaren continued to honour their historic race milestone, Norris suffering from 1950s reliability at the start of the session. Matters only getting worse for the team after they were fined 30 grand for using illegal tape. As Twitter pointed out, Piastri's sudden obsession with noose-shaped objects, that wasn't the only gremlin affecting those in the paddock on Friday afternoon. Sergio Perez's Cadillac suffering from an apparent vape addiction, and Franco Colapinto's Alpine suffering from Franco Colapinto. The only other question marks revolved around Mercedes, and where exactly they were in all of this. George Russell was convinced his luck would soon turn around, though it looked like his Silver Arrow might want to do that first, joining Alonso in the I shit myself around Monaco club with this scare at the swimming pool. It was only P4 and 5 for Russell and Antonelli at the end of FP2, and come Saturday, for one side of the garage, things were looking even worse. You see, Kimi Antonelli entered FP3 with the fastest time of all. As he went forwards, George Russell was trending in the opposite direction, 7 tenths down as the McLarens and Max Verstappen began to show their hands as well. With qualifying so important here, it's more crucial than ever not to throw your car into the wall in final practice. Someone might want to tell that to this guy, however. Behrman decided he wants to find a new way to ruin Ocon's lap at Massenet, and he wasn't the only one. Colapinto wanting to get that famous view of the Lowe's hairpin, and Liam Lawson spending FP3 trying to see how many of his mechanics he could send to the hospital with heart failure. Bortoletto, meanwhile, would wait until Q1 got underway before he clattered the barrier, the Audi man getting out of the drop zone only to clip the wall at the Nouvelle chicane. And as the rear of his yellow Audi was repurposed as a new Marshall post, maybe it was time to switch that back to red, as now we're in qualifying, I've got to play one of these. We'd restart the session with just enough time for one final flying lap, though with the drop zone already full of the Astons and Cadillacs, we weren't really expecting much to change. The Haas duo would be the ones joining them after a last dash from Sainz was enough to save the Spaniard some embarrassment. All while at the front, Russell continued to follow the same trends as practice. He was now a full second off the leading pace. Antonelli was looking far more impressive, though he wouldn't have this qualifying session all his own way. Max Verstappen showing up in Q2 to prove he more than had the pace for the front row, and even Hadjar getting up there, which I didn't even think was legal. Over in the drop zone, Gabriel Bortoleto was already the firm holder of P16, leaving 5 more spots up for grabs. Sorry, I'm making that sound like it's a good thing, aren't I? They'd be filled by the Williams pair, Hulkenberg, Colapinto and Lindblad. Gasly and Lawson the stars of Q2 to move on to the top 10 shootout and get the best view of a very enticing battle for pole. Drivers were going all out now, Piastri crossing the line sideways, which funnily enough didn't stay at the top of the times for very long. As the Australian proceeded to tumble down the order, Lewis Hamilton set the next time to beat, which Kimi Antonelli promptly did, taking the 12 car to the top of the table. Next up the road though was Max Verstappen, known for setting the best final sector around here and breaking Fernando Alonso's heart while he was at it in 2023. Turns out he was making up for that by ballsing this one to high hell. The fact that despite that all, the Dutchman was still just 1 millisecond off Antonelli's time meant pole was more than definitely on for the 3 machine, though we'd soon see this one have another sting in the tail as Leclerc just made the home crowd jizz themselves. Best thing of all, this was just the first runs. Now it's time to do that all over again. Verstappen was the first to find more time, taking provisional pole by 0.2 of a second, beating off Hamilton, who had to settle for P2. George Russell was next and proceeded to still be shit, and as his fanbase lost their collective minds, teammate Antonelli circulated behind, but didn't appear to be setting the sectors alight in the second silver arrow. And yet he still came across the line to go fastest of all, as eyes turned to Leclerc's final attempt, only to find that he'd slipped on some of his fans' ejaculate and put his Scuderia into the wall. A mega qualifying then, by far the best one we've seen in 2026. So now it's time for us to get to Sunday and be completely disappointed again. Before that, we've got to talk about our Expel End of the Week. That's far more exciting than Monaco race day anyway, isn't it? Now there's this weird concept on this platform called F1 Twitter Selfie Day. Basically, you take a photo of yourself, post it next to your favourite driver, and people apparently care for some reason. Here's one such example from a literal self-appointed snowflake, though being a fan of Max Verstappen was apparently too much for this bellend over here. There's no f***ing way a real black woman is a Max Verstappen fan. The f***ing mental gymnastics and cognitive dissonance required to be a fan of the most racist and sexist driver on the grid would be utterly earth-shattering. I mean, what the fuck are we doing? Stand up. Now as a white and apparently red man, this is a rather risky topic for me to bring up, so I'm just going to let the replies do the talking for me. Shut the entire f*** up, you absolute loser. Never speak on her again. Shut the f*** up, literally speaking like a deranged inbred rat. Kill yourself. You might be the biggest failed abortion on this platform. Jesus Christ. Big thanks to Formula Shit for bringing this knobhead to my attention, and if you'd like to nominate the next Expel End of the Week, use the hashtag on screen, tag me on the platform, or join the Discord server. Now we can't put it off any longer. Let's get to race day. Oh look, it's George Russell. Race day would open with Hamilton mixing up his outfit with one of Kim K's, Martin Brundle shooting his shot, and Max Verstappen doxing his and Charles Leclerc's address all on the world feed. Now I know why a security guard told me to piss off when I was outside that very building back in October. Anyway, it was lights out and away we don't go for Max Verstappen, whose engine shot itself on the grid and then left him stranded as the other 21 cars shot down to turn 1.
Any advice, guys?
So when the lights go out, you wait 1 second. Yeah.
Goes racing on the street of Monte Carlo. Verstappen barely moves from the front row.
On the bright side, in his own words, he can go home. Unfortunately, thanks to him, we now know where that is. Anyway, that gave Antonelli some breathing space as the McLarens locked horns behind, and the Haas duo continued their rehabilitation by crashing into each other. If you're wondering why I'm not showing you that footage, well then blame it on Formula 1 for not feeling that was remotely important. Yeah, let's zoom in on Kim Kardashian's breasts instead. Haas weren't the only team having a mare. The second Cadillac had also developed a vaping fix, and as Bottas was being brought in to retire, Sergio Perez was being hit with a time penalty for not being in his proper grid spot. George Russell was also under investigation for this, but the stewards seemingly thought he'd already suffered enough. Post-edit will here. Turns out they didn't, did they? George was instead handed the prostate of Isaac Hadjar's Red Bull, which was reporting power issues, yet still able to stay ahead. God bless Monaco. As Hadjar resorted to alternative means to keep hold of 4th position, he wasn't the only one reporting engine issues. Lando Norris's McLaren spending too long in the vicinity of a Frenchman as it too wanted to end itself before we'd even hit half distance. Now I may be making it sound like there was a lot of action in this one, but look, I'm not one for false reporting, so let me just clarify. This was fucking shit. We'd at last get an overtake on lap 34 as Russell finally made it by Hadjar through the pit stops, which were quickly becoming the main means of making up positions, Williams going so far as to command Alex Albon to drive like Lance Stroll for 10 laps to secure a double points finish for the team. Lando Norris was instructed to do the same thing to aid Oscar Piastri, which might just be the first time that's ever happened, so props to McLaren for being more equal. Oh, never mind, his engine's promptly offed itself instead this time. We were getting to the last 20 laps now, without a single safety car or overtake that wasn't caused by a driver going deliberately slowly, which kind of worked for me, as that was my bold prediction heading into this one over on my podcast Talk Shift. Then Stroll, who'd already picked up a track limits penalty around Monaco, goes and decides to do this, you useless advertisement for birth control. That did bring out the safety car, bunching the pack up, neutralising Antonelli's 30-second lead and saving George Russell the embarrassment of being lapped by his teammate, though now he had a separate problem to contend with. You see, as all this was going on, an unusual number of drivers were being caught speeding in the pit lane, meaning the 22 fastest drivers in the world either can't press a button correctly or something in the FIA timing booth is having an epileptic fit. Guess what reason Formula 1 decided to go with? The safety car at least allowed those with existing penalties to serve them without issue, apart from George Russell, who decided the rules just didn't apply to him for some reason. We'll get back to that. First, we were racing again, Antonelli leading Hamilton and Leclerc. Hang on, where's he gone? Oh, that's not very good. At this point, the shit nature of Monaco's track was actually the only thing providing us with any excitement out there, as it was discovered to be breaking up at the final corner, leading to what sent Charles back to the Monaco curse and likely taking Stroll out of the equation as well. You know what? Maybe I've treated you too harshly. I'm sorry for calling you a useless advertisement for birth control. No, I'm not. Oh, I'm definitely not now. The red flag gave us plenty more to talk about. George Russell went crying to the stewards, who promptly awarded him with an additional drive-through penalty. Someone else told Pierre Gasly he now has 2 of those for driving the right speed down the pit lane. And Lewis Hamilton assaulted an F1 cameraman, which is more attention than Kim was giving them.
No, you don't need to push me, mate.
After a lengthy delay to fix the circuit, which in the high-tech environment that is Formula 1 meant sweeping the layout with a dustpan and brush, we were headed back out for a sprint to the finish. Antonelli holding off a fast-starting Hamilton, as Hadjar dropped like a stone and the rest of the midfield got their payback on the Williams of Carlos Sainz, who eventually got bored and tried one of those Arava try-not-to-die reverse layout challenges. No further overtakes then, but with half the field facing penalties, the order was still subject to change. You know, I really love these races where we get to focus more on the timing tower than the action itself. Antonelli would come across the line then to take his 5th win in a row, Lewis Hamilton coming home 2nd and Pierre Gasly 3rd on the road, only to find himself shuffled down to 7th immediately after. That allowed the Racing Bulls drivers to survive another weekend and also allowed Isaac Hadjar to be the French representation up on the podium, though he's also under investigation for a red flag infringement, so congrats to Oscar Piastri then for maybe or maybe not getting that P3 instead. A similar sentiment can be seen further down the field, Hulkenberg facing 10 seconds for sending Sainz to the stratosphere and promoting Sergio Perez into Cadillac's first ever points. Only he still can't line up in his grid box, so well done to Fernando Alonso for your first of the season instead. Potentially, this post-race has been all levels of fun. The big one here though is George Russell, already losing points for not being on the podium and now going home without any at all. As I said last week, I would count him out at this stage, although I'm not going to make that mistake again. If you enjoyed the comedy review though, I'd appreciate it if you dropped it a like and got subscribed. We've got the IndyCar review coming out tomorrow as well, plus Formula 2 exclusively for the members and patrons in the coming days. Big thanks to them for supporting what I do, and if you want to join them, links are down in the description below. Finally, before I go, I recommend you head over to my Instagram. Me and Stingray Rob have done a bit of a collab over there, and yeah, it kind of killed me. Anyway, once you've done that, you know what to do. Off. So I just want to kick this video off by sort of addressing the speculation and the allegations that have come out of the last comedy review for the IndyCar race at Gateway. There was a glaring error of judgment on my part in that video, and I made a really just stupid mistake, and I want to address it now. I don't do this very often, but I need to hold my hands up here and just apologize, because in that video I only included one red flag meme. And actually there were 2. So I said we just make up for that now, so here you go.
That's rude.
Hey there guys, I'm Will, and welcome to the Comedy Review, a show that's less competent than Charles Leclerc's brakes at the moment. Yeah, that sounds about right. Hang on, less competent. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport. Things like this. Kim Kardashian identifies as an entitled bellend. Oscar Piastri tells us the 3rd letter of the alphabet. C. And Le Mans commentators get themselves in trouble again.
Why don't boxers have sex the night before a fight?
Stop it.
It's because they don't like each other very much.
Lots to cover then as we get into the not so Spanish anymore Grand Prix, starting with this. Now, there were lots of talking points after Monaco, and don't worry, we'll get to Charles Leclerc in a minute, but the big story of the last week has all been about the FIA screwing up an equation we all learned back in year 8. Speed equals distance divided by time. Now, I think most of you will agree that's not a particularly hard concept to grasp, apart from the FIA, who appear to be f***ing idiots for some reason. Like most, I've become a bit of an expert in pit lane speed limits over the last 7 days, so let me break this one down for you. The car speeds are determined by several timing loops along the pit lane, where the distance between them is divided by the time taken to determine the driver's speed. If that's below the limit for the pit lane, that's absolutely fine. And if they're over it, well, they get cast into the depths of hell with Nikita Mazepin and anyone at Aston Martin who suggested they should replace Lance Stroll. Jump back to Monaco then, and all of a sudden we're seeing more pit lane speeding penalties than we usually get across a whole season, all seemingly in the same timing loop, which was already known to have an issue before the race even started. Maybe something's gone wrong, and we should just investigate this after the race. That was far too intelligent for the FIA, who've now found themselves in a hell of a lot of trouble. The storms were already brewing when Alpine was spotted, wielding an infamous trundle wheel after the race, Pierre Gasly the most affected, losing what could be his only shot at a Monaco podium, and made to look like the world's biggest tit when the team didn't tell him, allowing the baguette to celebrate through his cool-down lap, all while the crowds around him watched his name plummet down the timing tower. The following Friday, we get our answer, the FIA holding up their hands, admitting that they couldn't measure distance, and giving Gasly his P3 back, which somehow has made things even worse. Gasly's penalty was the easiest to rectify, given he hadn't actually served it, time simply being added on after he crossed the finish line. What about everyone else then? Oscar Piastri, for instance, who should have had that third place had he not served the 5 seconds in his final pit stop. Or George Russell, who was handed the drive-through for not correctly serving his penalty, and then had to deal with his race being completely ruined, plus being mean for his main character energy throughout the red flag. The worst thing for me is that if Antonelli wins this championship by 15 points now, we're all going to come back to this incident. And that's particularly worrying given it's been 5 years and people still haven't shut up about Abu Dhabi 2021. Elsewhere in the news, let's talk about Charles Leclerc, one of 2 drivers to suffer from Monaco's inability to build roads last weekend. But don't worry, French construction man, this isn't your fault. Apparently, it's the brakes instead. Leclerc pulled no punches after the race, blaming the stopping potential of his Ferrari for all of his recent woes, and looking forward to switching supplier for the not Spanish Grand Prix, and that didn't make his current supplier Brembo very happy. The brake disc manufacturer were quote astonished at Leclerc's comments and have spent the last week trying to play damage control, which is rather ironic considering had they just shut up we probably wouldn't be talking about this at all. Here's my favourite of their tweets this week. Brembo's first F1 win was the 1975 Monaco Grand Prix with Lauda and the Ferrari 312T. Back then, the car relied on Brembo cast iron brake discs rather than today's advanced carbon ones, and peak deceleration didn't even reach 2G, which is less than half of what the modern drivers experience. Right, you're salty, we get it, now shut up already. The comments naturally didn't hold back. It shows they no longer make brakes of the same quality as they did 50 years ago. Notice how Scuderia Ferrari or Charles Leclerc don't follow this account. He crashed that one too. You know what, we're just going to assign Brembo our ex-Bellend of the week for this and move on. Charles Leclerc has his new brakes now, so problem solved. Really hope that doesn't age like milk for some reason. Now I promise we'll get to talking about practice in a minute, but first, it appears Aston Martin might have finally broke Fernando Alonso. At the start of the season, it was all, I'm not going to retire until I have a good car, and being a dad isn't going to change my outlook on racing. Well, 6 races in with the green wheelie bin may just have changed all that. Alonso made headlines again this week when he claimed this will likely be his last race at the Catalunya circuit, hinting it's a retirement within the next 2 years. This coming as a huge shock to the paddock, who honestly expected Alonso to still be racing, even as his kids booked him into a home. We now have more rumours suggesting he could now link up with Alpine, ending his career with one final toxic stint for the Enstone-based team. Given they've already tried to blind collar Pinto with dry ice this weekend, maybe there's just some truth to that. Speaking of, should we finally talk about FP1? Given we'd seen the 2026 cars around this venue before, this marked a perfect opportunity to let some of the new blood have a go. Amongst the rookies in FP1, we'd have B-Tech Logan Sargent, B-Tech Oscar Piastri, and B-Tech Yuki Tsunoda. No, sorry, that's just racist, isn't it? The barriers were deemed far enough away to let Colton Herta have a go in the Cadillac. Fred Vesti was in for Mercedes, Dino Beganovic at Ferrari, and finally reigning F2 champion Leo Fornaroli stepping up for McLaren and setting a stonking lap to end the session 5th overall. You may have noticed McLaren's 1000th Grand Prix livery still on the car, as the team still argue over when their 1000th race actually is, and the other outfit sporting a new look this weekend, the V-Carb, sporting a football-inspired livery in support of the World Cup, presumably how good they are at firing people. I'm glad we could pad time at the start of this video, as over on track, there was all going on. George Russell got to remind himself what finishing first felt like when he topped the opening session from the second McLaren of Piastri, faring less well with Williams, Luke Browning unable to even make it out of the garage, Carlos Sainz getting a little further, his FW48 getting halfway down the pit lane before it killed itself too. Gabriel Bortoleto was complaining of zero grip, which might have had something to do with spending half the session testing racing lines through the gravel, and Herta's fetish for walls almost caught him out as well, as the teams could breathe a sigh of relief as the rookies came in and the main grid was back on track for FP2. It would be Lando Norris on top here, as Mercedes now looked to be the ones struggling. Russell taking Bortoleto's racing lines, whilst Antonelli had spent FP1 cosplaying as Spider-Man in the crowds and seemed eager to join them once again as this session went on. Aston Martin were out there as well, Alonso sensing his opportunity to perform his sole overtake of the weekend on pit exit, and Lance Stroll on a separate mission to seemingly test out alternative track layouts around this Catalonia circuit. Liam Lawson wasn't faring much better, managing just 8 laps before his V-carb conked out on the pit straight, and Sergio Perez would end the day, revealing he's still somewhat butthurt from losing his Red Bull drive at the end of 2024. On the bright side, we seem to have a battle for pole, so let's jump to Saturday and find out how many seconds Kimi Antonelli takes it by this time. So as Luke Browning got the closest to the circuit he'd been all weekend, we were getting ready for one final practice session ahead of qualifying. Russell back on top as Antonelli was left playing with the Aston Martins and telling us what we were all really thinking.
My God, Stroll, as always.
Besides that, Stroll being more of a menace and the brake pedal being the latest thing to fall off the Cadillac, oh, guess who makes those by the way, it was a pretty quiet final practice session, so let's not waste any more time and just jump straight into qualifying. Q1 would see Bortoleto and Lawson in the competition for who had the biggest ball sack by staying in the pits despite being 12th and 13th in the order. They would in fact survive as the drop zone was made up of the usual candidates, Ocon and Albon the somewhat surprises, then the 2 caddies, and finally the Aston Martins, a further second off the pace, and Lance Stroll ahead of Fernando Alonso for the first time in over 700 days. According to him though, he doesn't give a shit. The real shock came from the McLarens, whose pace had jumped off a cliff and were now finding themselves clinging to remain in the top 10 shootout. This was made fairly easier when Lindblad attempted his teammate's strategy of remaining in the pit lane, only to find himself 11th at the end of the session. Bortoleto, Behrman, Sainz and the 2 Alpines would join the Briton as Hülkenberg got into Q3 for the first time in 2026 and thus got the best seat in the house as he and Lawson got to watch the remaining 8 drivers fight it out for pole. 8 would soon become 7 however, as Charles Leclerc found the wall early on. No doubt this was also brake related, or maybe steering this time, or just perhaps the fault of his underdeveloped frontal lobe. Speaking of, the rest of his kind now get to enjoy one of these. When we went back to green, it was Russell on top form, Kimi Antonelli thinking he'd unlocked something in the middle sector, only to be completely humbled by his veteran teammate. In the end, the only man who looked like he might spoil Mercedes' party was ex-Mercedes man Lewis Hamilton, who ended up splitting the pair with his final effort to get his Ferrari onto the front row, and set up a thrilling scrap for a race day that, admittedly, is usually a little bit shit. Kind of saying that so the racing gods can prove me wrong on that one. Race day would open with Carlos Sainz attempting to snipe the Spanish population, Lewis Hamilton doing the world a favour by ignoring Nico Rosberg, and whatever this noise was from Franco Colapinto. For everyone else, it was lights out, and not a whole lot happening if I'm being honest. Russell would lead Hamilton at the start as the McLarens got involved, and Isaac Hadjar fancied watching this battle so much he dropped to the rear of the field to get the best view possible. As he started play fighting with the Williams, further ahead Charles Leclerc was making amends for Saturday, swooping past Piastri and into P6 and making us completely forget the Australian existed for the remainder of this one. Now this was giving the feeling of an old school Formula 1 race, and by that I mean the tyres had as much life as someone in a coma ward and there were pit stops left, right and centre. The leaders' tyres lasted just 12 laps before they were forced to box, Hamilton swapping his soft compound for the hards that Tifosi had been preparing while watching him cruise around in P2. While Russell responded immediately to that one, that wasn't so much the case 20 or so laps later. #Bless moving on to a set of mediums, Antonelli began to come alive and turn the heat up on his Mercedes teammate. And if you're wondering why I'm not covering anything that happened between those stops, well, this is the circuit Barcelona Catalunya, and there's a reason they're replacing it for a literal Formula E track later in the season. The Mercs would finally come in towards the end of the lap 30s, by which point Lewis was on a completely different strategy and really looking like a proper contender for the win, ironically helped by Fernando Alonso, whose Aston Martin conked out right outside his very own grandstand. That was the latest in a string of reliability-related failures. Special, Porridge Man and the Hole, cool falling victim, and next up was Alexander Albon, whose TV camera caught a glimpse of James Vowles' search history and attempted to make a bid for freedom. The resulting virtual safety car gave Ferrari the pit stop window they needed. Cue a frantic 2 minutes as we waited to see if they would actually realise this, but in the end, the 44 car came into box and came out in the race lead. Now it was simply a case of seeing if he could hold on, and I'm not sure what Kim's promised Lewis tonight, but it clearly seems to be working. With yet another victory lost by manners out of his control, George Russell's day was about to get worse when he spotted the Italian fetus up his arse crack again, the Briton subsequently forgetting how to defend as Antonelli flew by with 5 laps left to go. All Kimi needed to worry about now was his track limits violations, the Italian reportedly way over the limit that the stewards decided they could stay out of the public light if they just don't hand out any penalties at all. Anyway, order was soon restored when Antonelli's engine also defied track limits and fell out of its own arse. At the same time, Leclerc lost all power steering, the Monegasque crawling back to the pits as the VSC was out yet again, and handing Hamilton that last little bit of reprieve. He'd come across the line to take win number 106, yet win number 1 with the glue factory. Russell and Norris coming home to make it an all-British podium as well. I bet the Spanish f***ing hate that. A historic win then, making this an exciting race, despite the fact I think I can count all of the on-track overtakes on, well, one hand. Even so, congratulations to Lewis, that was one hell of a drive. Fair play to Alpine and VCarb as well, who in all that took home double points finishes for the weekend. Don't know what noise that was from Colapinto, but it clearly seemed to do the job. The big question now then, do we have a 3-way title fight on our hands? Antonelli's retirement cutting his lead down to just 41 points to Lewis Hamilton, which, let's be honest, is still a shit ton. But if Ferrari really have outdeveloped Mercedes, well then you never know. All I can say is I was not expecting to say that line at the start of the season. All that's left to do then is thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed the comedy review, then to get subscribed for more in the future. If you can't tell, I'm a little under the weather this weekend, granted that may be due to 2 bottles of wine, but still, sympathy like would not go amiss right now. Members and patrons, meanwhile, got an early preview to this, plus get the Formula 2 comedy review exclusively as well. That's honestly the best way you can support the channel at the moment, so a big thank you to everyone over there. And if you want to get involved, links are down in the description below. I'll be back for IndyCar next week. Until then, you know the drill. F*** off. So it's hot. Like, really, really hot. I mean, it's a good thing I've got my my fan here. Hang on. Powered by Cadillac.
That's rude.
Hey there guys, I'm Will, and welcome to the Comedy Review, the show that has a longer runtime than the ceasefire in the Middle East. Yeah, that won't get me in trouble, well done. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport. Things like this. Isaac Hadjar really enjoys his contractual obligations. Lando Norris wears pussy. And we got 9/11 in 2026. That's not F1 related, just thought it was interesting to see what Mazepin's up to these days. Anyway, in completely unrelated news, let's talk about Mohammed Ben Sulayem. I we had a segment for that, didn't we?
What the fuck have the FIA done this week? Oh, Mohammed, what the fuck have you done now?
Yes, in the FIA's latest attempt to morph itself into the Nazi party, it's been revealed that the presidential term limits have been abolished, meaning Big Ben here can remain in power for as long as he likes. This coming alongside previous rule changes, where our supreme leader gets to select those who are allowed to run against him, and these new FIA welcome armbands set to be worn by all members. For legal reasons, that last one is called a joke. At this point, I'm just waiting for Big Ben here to start calling his move back to V8's the final solution. Elsewhere, we've got some driver market news. Formula 2 frontrunner Nikola Solov rumoured to have already signed a deal with VCarb for next year. And Liam Lawson, fresh off talking about his struggles on a podcast this week, finding out about his upcoming demotion via social media for a second f***ing time. This has since been rejected by the team, and we already debunked this earlier in the week over on my Instagram. Just a subtle plug to go and check that out after watching this one. Other paddock rumours have linked Max Verstappen to McLaren and Esteban Ocon to the job centre. But don't worry, my fellow croissants, Ao Komatsu has full trust in the Frenchman, and everything is okay. Hey, at least that seat's not going to reserve driver Ryo Hirakawa. Well, especially not after this. The Toyota-backed driver was one of several quote-unquote rookies making his appearance in FP1. Dino Beganovic in the Ferrari, Paul Aaron for Audi, Ayumu Iwasa for Racing Bulls, Jack Crawford for the Wheelie Bins, Luke Browning actually making it out on track this time for Williams, and Pierre Gasly for Alpine. He's not a rookie, he just spent the session driving like one. Lewis Hamilton was another to go off. The Briton, fresh off the back of his first Ferrari win last time out, has spent the last fortnight reminding everyone to remember who they are. Well, maybe you should remember your brake zone too, you f***ing idiot. With Europe in a heatwave and the whole Spielberg venue receiving the live Roman Grosjean experience, reliability was beginning to rear its head. Max Verstappen spending more time going in reverse throughout FP1. His courtiers this week weren't faring much better. The papaya outfit attempted to make space for the Dutchman when Piastri's brakes mysteriously failed to work, while Lando Norris could only watch from the sidelines. McLaren undressed his machine to diagnose its performance issues. Cadillac, meanwhile, they finally found enough room in the budget to paint both halves of their car, a significant upgrade package hoping to boost the American team into the midfield. That's starting really well when Sergio Perez brought out the red flags at the end of the opening practice session. session. Having realised this allowed him to take the afternoon off, Checo wasted little time before pulling this stunt again in FP2. Teammate Valtteri Bottas following suit soon after, the Finn spotted shitting sparks down the length of the pit lane. For the more competent out there, turn 3 was proving to be a struggle. Lewis Hamilton recreating the championship leaders' racing lines from lap 1 last year, the Red Bulls suffering with not enough turn-in, Lando Norris on the other end of that spectrum. Really though, Friday practice was all about one man, Kimi Antonelli topping both practice sessions and really looking like the man to beat going into quali. Before we get to that, it's time for our ex-bell end of the week. So my DMs have been really interesting this week. That whole Fernando Alonso dying at 1:30 meme has resurfaced. Some guy tagged me in the Charlie Kirk assassination. Yeah, besides some salty Verstappen fans really scraping the bottom of the barrel for this one. We start here then. F1 Big Data dropping this stat. Charles Leclerc has never suffered 2 consecutive DNFs while driving for Ferrari. This was posted 6 days before this happened, which hasn't made the Monegasque Goon Club very happy. I hope you die and your family burns in the darkest pits of hell, you stupid f***ing bitch. That's charming, isn't it? This comes from Mutzlek Fosi, not quite sure what that was meant to say, but big ups for giving it a go. This is usually the bit where we cut to some replies. Unfortunately, a bit like this guy's family, no one seems to care, so not really sure what we do now. Well, big thank you to this guy for the recommendation anyway, and if you'd like to nominate the next ex-bell end of the week, use the hashtag on screen, tag me on the platform, or join the Discord server. Now, on to Saturday. Oh look, Ferrari is showing their intelligence for once.
I'd skydive into the track one day, that's what I'd like to do.
Oh, does Ferrari allow you?
Yeah.
They don't with me.
Really?
Yeah, I wonder why. So as this Red Bull mechanic questioned his life choices, final practice was getting underway and Charles Leclerc was making up for lost time in the Ferrari. By emulating Lewis Hamilton's run plan, I'm not quite sure the turn 3 cock-up was also necessary to replicate. Cadillac had also forced their drivers out onto the circuit, Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas doing their best to throw their machines into the Austrian walls, though holding up to go 19th and 20th respectively. No bonus points for guessing who ended up behind them. Other than that, and Max Verstappen finding even more things to complain about, it was a fairly quiet final session. Mercedes still ending it on top, though this time it was George Russell taking the spoils. That set us up for a fantastic German-powered duel for qualifying, though as it would turn out, things wouldn't quite be that simple. We'd have to remove the screamers first, as Q1 got underway, pressure already mounting on the Williams pair when the Haas of Ocon decided it wanted to be competent for once. They would find themselves out, along with the caddies and the wheelie bins, Alonso and Stroll finding a new low when despite being on the shortest circuit on the calendar, they were a second off the pace, and Valtteri Bottas in 20th. Q2 would see Max Verstappen in the hot seat, the Dutchman 10th in the dying moments of the session, though still deciding the best place for him was apparently the pit lane. Thankfully, the only cars behind were the Audis, Alpines and the Haas pair, and despite hairline almost sneaking in, Verstappen would be safe to take part in Q3, which is where things really did begin to go to shit. No drama on the initial runs, the fight seemingly a three-way affair between the fetus, the snitch and the school bully. Ferrari, meanwhile, were busy fingering themselves, Hamilton finally making it around turn 3 for seemingly the first time all weekend, so shocked at this achievement he aborted the rest of his lap. The glue factory would recoup for the final runs and suddenly go fastest of anyone, Leclerc leading the way from Hamilton as the McLarens failed to make similar progress. Next up was Max Verstappen, and yeah, that's not gone very well. The Dutchman's active aero, being about as active as, well, me about 18 months ago, sent him into the wall and brought up the yellows, scuppering the Mercedes laps in the process, or, well, at least it should have done. While Antonelli saw the flashing yellow panels and aborted his run at the final corner, George Russell's late nights wanking over the FIA rulebook were about to pay off, the Briton realising the situation hadn't been upgraded to double yellow flags at this stage, and thus lifting off just enough to stay off the naughty step, and yet still rocket himself to pole. This, meanwhile, were the scenes in the Ferrari garage. Anyone else getting 2008 vibes off of this one? The following investigation would clear George of any further wrongdoing, leaving him 3 spots ahead of his championship rival on race day, the rest of Twitter screaming British bias, and me very glad that we've had our ex-bell end of the week already. All that was left to do was wait for Sunday, but first, here's Carlos Sainz addressing your mum.
Oh.
On to said race day then, as George Russell re-identified as a tit, and Fernando Alonso got to drive the fastest thing he's been in all year. I mean, look how happy he looked. It was time for lights out, and 21 of the 22 cars navigate the first lap without issue. Not sure what circuit Kimi Antonelli thought he was racing around, but hey, could always be worse. Look what happened last year. Some good news for Cadillac fans, Bottas and Perez were on fire. Now, some bad news for Cadillac fans, Bottas and Perez were literally on fire. Liam Lawson was also complaining of flames in the cockpit, VCarb leaving the Kiwi out, however, in the hope that death by smoke inhalation would free up a spot for Nicolas Solov. Meanwhile, Kimi Antonelli's antics continued as he attempted to pass a struggling Leclerc for third on lap 2. That move putting the pair at risk to Verstappen and the McLarens behind, the Dutchman making it past both of them as Kimi became the filling and the McLaren sandwich further back. which history suggests doesn't go down very well. At this stage, the Italian started to mark his comeback, finally making it past Leclerc on lap 8. It's just up the road, Verstappen set his sights on Hamilton for third, and not to sound like a broken record, but that doesn't tend to end very well either. Lo and behold, we're treated to a titanic scrap between these two, Hamilton somehow winning out as Verstappen jumped straight to the team radio to cry penalty. The FIA listening to this and telling the Dutchman to throw himself off a cliff. After the first round of pit stops, these two were at it again, the 3-car finally staying ahead this time round to make it up into the podium places. This was because Antonelli hadn't stopped yet, the Italian doing so just as Carlos Sainz's Williams machine committed suicide on the front straight. No advantage gained for the championship leader, however, the stewards deciding just to gormlessly stare at the 55 machine before finally throwing out the VSC. Hamilton would pit under the safety car, which sounds like a great Ferrari strategy until you realise he'd already made his stop earlier in the race. We'll let them off the hook here though, as that Ferrari was chewing through its tyres like a 6-year-old on a Tide Pod. The Briton was at least on fresher tyres when it came to embarrassing Leclerc once again. The Monegasque fighting hard before boxing anyway. I'm not quite sure what became of the Ferrari strategy at this point, other than giving Hamilton the chance to pass his teammate many more times over the remainder of this one. A pretty mental race so far then, and we're only at half distance. Don't worry though, the rest of it was far more normal. The closing laps were all about watching Max Verstappen close in towards race leader Russell, and when that stopped looking interesting, it was all about Kimi Antonelli closing in on Max Verstappen, and when that stopped looking interesting, Sky Sports tried to tell us there was rain about. If the track temperature is 62 degrees, I don't think we're falling for that one. In an anticlimactic finish then, Russell would cross the line to take his first race victory since Melbourne, Verstappen recording a season's best P2, and Antonelli rounding out the podium to maintain a steady gap at the top of the championship. A race of two halves then, but we've had a hell of a lot worse in 2026. Anyway, if you enjoyed the comedy review, leave it a like and get subscribed, as we're nearly at 200k. Yeah, okay, fine, you've heard this bit before, haven't you? Big thank you to the members and patrons though, who got an early access preview to this one, plus we'll be getting the Formula 2 comedy review as always in the coming days. Links are down below if you'd like to find out more. Meanwhile, we'll be back next weekend as we get to Silverstone, where I'll actually be live on the Saturday, so if you see me, come and say hello. Anyway, for the rest of you, you know what to do. Off. So McLaren have made one of those I read my hate comments videos, only it's 2026, so instead now we're made to feel guilty for things like rotten papaya, or was the whole strategy team sleeping, or I need public execution. Yeah, alright, that one's quite bad actually. Guess it's a good time then to try reading some of mine. Why do you always look like you walked into your mum riding your dad? Yeah, actually I take that back, let's just crack on.
That's rude.
Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to the Comedy Review, the show that somehow gets approved by the copyright god. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport. Things like this. Lewis Hamilton arrives to unclog your toilet. George Russell gets a bit too excited. And Go Tiffy DJs at the pop-up hotel. No, I'm not making that up. I wonder what his next venue's going to be though. Plenty to talk about then, and given it's the British Grand Prix, let's start with our greatest enemy. We all love the French, don't we? Okay, no we don't, but it's a bit too early in this one to be caught being xenophobic. Someone else who apparently hates the French are Haas, as Esteban Ocon enters this weekend, firmly in the hot seat, so much so in fact, one of the drivers rumoured to be replacing him treated his mechanics like a bowling alley last week. Yuki Tsunoda has been another name floated around, and if the American outfit don't fancy investing in carbon fibre booster seats, then F2 rookies Rafa Kamara or Leo Fornaroli could also be in the mix. In fact, with every day that passes, it appears more names enter the fray, just none of them happen to be Esteban Ocon. As no one mourns his loss, out on the paddock, there was an energy in the air. Unfortunately, none of that appears to be translating onto the circuit though. Despite numerous revisions across the season so far, F1 2026 regulations, being, well, I believe the technical term is shit, continue to loom over the sport as it faced its largest challenge yet. All of the false optimism from pre-season was now gone, Max Verstappen laughing when he tested the layout in the simulator, and Alonso referring to maggots and Beckett as a recharging zone. In fact, it seems the only team not worried about the latest energy crisis was Cadillac, given they're prone to blowing up before that starts to become a problem. With so much England on our screens this week, British bias was bound to dominate the headlines. Don't worry, Sky Sports are here to make sure everyone feels at home.
Oscar, they say size isn't everything though.
Bit personal, isn't it?
So I know they say that home crowds are worth a couple of tenths. Does that kind of then still count for you here, I guess? Wearing McLaren? I mean,
yes, I'll go with that.
Yeah.
So, no then. As Oscar got his own back by driving at Sky's production team like a white van at a German Christmas market, then just stealing their go-kart and running away, it was time to get into first practice, or only practice given it was a sprint weekend, the first year since 2021, which went really well, didn't it? Hamilton was on fire though in first practice, fastest of anyone on Friday morning, though that sentiment wouldn't be shared by the rest of the field. F1's latest British driver, Arvid Lindblad, complaining about something not sounding super nice on the rear, a feeling I can relate to after my curry last week. Oh, and on the subject of shitting oneself, here's Oscar Piastri. As you can probably tell, there was an array of new special liveries gracing the field this week. McLaren accepting their drop-off in pace by dressing up as Cadillac, the American team also going full patriotism for July 4th, and Williams playing a game of Where's Wally to work out what exactly they've changed on their FW48. Alex Albon was one of many searching for pace in this session, eventually discovering if you start forgetting that the corners exist, you can lap Silverstone much faster, and that's handy, as up next was sprint qualifying. Let's start with the obvious, it's SQ1 and the Astons and Cadillacs are out. Only Lance Stroll is now 53 seconds off the pace. The battle to get out of those final two spots in the drop zone came down to Haas and Williams, who were on fast laps according to the commentary, which feels a bit like an exaggeration, but it worked as Behrman and Ocon completed the bottom six. The 2x2 nature looks set to continue in Q2, only for the beautiful simplicity to be ruined by the French. We'll just add that to the list of other things we hate them for. Gasly would go P11, just 800ths from bumping Norris out of the battle for sprint pole, Colapinto, the Audis and Williams drivers making up the remainder of the drop zone. All the while, it had been a two-horse fight at the front, the Italian stallion of Kimi Antonelli up against the to-be Pritt stick of Lewis Hamilton. Only the veterans seem to have an edge around here. That will be further proven in SQ3, as #Bless pipped Kimi for sprint pole, Verstappen completing the top three, and Russell continuing his good run of form by finishing... Oh, never mind, ignore that last bit then. Tommy Robinson's going to have a field day with this one, isn't he? Saturday was a pretty mental day for me. YouTube invited me out to watch the Formula 1, eat tons of free food and drink a sensible amount of wine. There's more on this and how I got rejected by David Croft over on my socials, so go and check those out once you finish watching this one. And I do just want to say a massive thank you to YouTube and to all of you, because I would not be in this position were it not for you all. It was great to meet a few of you at the track as well, even the guy that wouldn't shut up about Crofty's cheesy sausage. I feel like I recognise him from somewhere, by the way. Anyway, well, this was one of the best days of my life. As anyone who's ever watched the F1 Grand Prix live will tell you, I had absolutely no idea what was going on, so bear with me as I try and piece all this back together. Antonelli got the better start off the front row, which is not a sentence I expected to be saying a few months ago, but the glue factory held on to retain the lead through turn 1. Fortunes weren't going so well for those on row 2, Verstappen and Leclerc. Well, I can't even see them anymore. Antonelli's attack on Hamilton quickly shifted to defence as Norris made his way by, the British one too, making the Silverstone crowd jizz themselves, which was slightly premature as the Italian used the energy deficit to fire his way back past at the end of the hangar straight. Come to think of it, it's not the first time premature has been used to describe Norris fans, is it? George Russell was the next car in the McLaren's mirrors, making short work of the pair at the end of lap 1 to move into third. All this doing wonders for Lewis Hamilton, who was streaming away at the front towards a surely dominant victory. You know what, that sounds a little bit like foreshadowing, doesn't it? Still, could be worse. Look what Lance is having to deal with. As Russell's energy, or perhaps lack of it, saw him plummet back through the order like a protester off a tower block, the gap was slowly closing at the front. Lap by lap, Antonelli was getting closer, eventually pulling off the most 2026 pass imaginable on the 7-time champion down at the hangar straight. Yeah, that just showcases driver skill, doesn't it? Sorry, I think the British bias might have rubbed off on me. With Perez and Alonso busy fingering each other down in Formula 2, there was still plenty of scraps going on within the top 10. Russell doing his best to showcase the dominance of his Mercedes, and Liam Lawson up against Hadjar in the top 8, and it looks like he really wants to stay there. No issues like that for Antonelli, who after taking the lead was able to drive away at the front to take the sprint win. #blessed, and Nozza giving us some British representation on the podium, and with the Italian on raging form, it was now time to do this all over again. But before that, let's find out who's RX Bell End of the Week. Not gonna lie, I feel genuinely uncomfortable reading out this one. I want his fat, girthy cock inside me. My hole deserves to be ripped apart by him. I want his dick to slide in and out of me fast. F me so hard, f me till I'm loose. I want his cock to slide in and out of my mouth. #need that so bad. #Osclut for life. #cracking 81 times a day. Jesus Christ. Rather unbelievably, this post seemed to act as a magnet for fellow members of the less intelligent. That said, a few stable souls had enough brain power remaining to come up with this. Am I the only one to find this weird? Interesting thing to read after waking up. You're going to be in the next McLaren mental health vid. That's brilliant. Big thank you to these two. In fact, no, I hate these two for bringing this to my attention and burning it into my retinas for the rest of the weekend. But if you'd like to nominate the next X Bell End of the Week, use the hashtag on screen, tag me on the platform, or join the Discord server. And with that then, it's on to race day. Oh look, actually I forgot to write anything in for this bit. George Russell really needed to pull his finger out of his arse for this one, so here he is, making a mistake I've literally never seen before. On the bright side, I was taking photos from YouTube hospitality as this was going on, so enjoy my live reaction to it all. Russell was luckily able to get out of the gravel trap, though less fortunate was the Alpine of Franco Colapinto, who was flying, just not in the way he really wanted to be. The other spot in the drop zone, alongside the caddies and wheelie bins, looked to be going the way of Gabriel Bortoleto, who seemingly didn't realise Q1 was going on until the final few minutes of the session. Fortunately for the Brazilian, the track was rapidly improving. And if you don't believe me, the top four is currently Hajar, Lawson, Leclerc, Hulkenberg. That shoved Ocon into the drop zone as we move swiftly onto Q2. Bortoleto almost escaping again, though having to settle for P11 at the flag. Audi teammate Hulkenberg would join him, along with the Williams duo, Gasly and Oliver Behrman, as the same top 10 as the day before, prepared for the final part of qualifying. Difference was, Antonelli and Russell looked to be the class of the field this time round. Well, at least for the first half of Q3. Antonelli improved in his final run to put a quarter of a second buffer between him and his teammate, which was a lovely little pocket for the Ferraris to slot into. Leclerc ahead of Hamilton in P2 and 3. Elsewhere, we can shout out Isaac Hadjar for being the first Red Bull teammate to out-qualify Max Verstappen at Silverstone, so as we wait for his impending assassination, it's time for the British Grand Prix. Before the race, F1 drivers got to take part in a Lego parade. Everyone handed go-karts and told, do what you want, which went about as well as one would have expected. Also, what the f*** was Ben Sulayem doing here for some reason? Elsewhere, this race saw Liam Lawson gift fans with what was left of his fillings and a complete disregard for any and all track limits, allowing Fernando Alonso to take Aston Martin's only win of the 2026 season. In other news, Sergio Perez was roaming around, asking to be shot, and Christian Horner was back in the paddock. I don't know who this is, but I'm assuming it's not his PA. Fernando Alonso's day didn't get off to the best of starts when he broke down on the formation lap. I don't know about you, but I'm starting to think that Lego car might actually be quicker. He would get it restarted, and eventually it was time to go racing. Leclerc getting the best start from the front row and shooting past Antonelli into the lead, and Hamilton taking little time to join his teammate to make it a Ferrari 1-2. George Russell now fancied the run as our attention turned to Alex Albon, forgetting Woodcoe was actually a corner rather than a straight line. Could be worse, Lewis Hamilton's mega start's just been put down to thinking you can go on 4 lights instead of 5. Piastri was another to come a cropper on the opening lap. That McLaren's meant to hark back to 1966. Maybe he just wanted to be historically accurate by ripping his front wing off. As the race began to settle down then, we got our first battles within the top 10. Verstappen restoring the order at Red Bull by passing Hadjar on lap 3, and Antonelli hunting down Hamilton once again in the fight for P2. Going down the inside of comps because he's not a f***ing idiot, is he? That corner was becoming the favourite for overtakes, Max Verstappen even overcoming his post-Hamilton stress disorder to pass the Mercedes of George Russell there a few laps later. Lewis Hamilton, meanwhile, was complaining of understeer, so Ferrari called him into the pits, which he didn't like because his tyres were apparently good. But did I miss Dementia Awareness Week or something? The glue factory also didn't tell Lewis about his penalty, so imagine pulling into a stop you don't want to do, only to find your team pulling the mannequin challenge. Actually, this is Ferrari. Hamilton's probably not surprised in the slightest, is he? Hashtag Blessed Day looked momentarily like it was about to get even worse when a virtual safety car was deployed, this eventually being put down to a stray Norris-branded umbrella, fancying a closer look at the day's action. Ocon was the only one to come into the pits for that, so it didn't hand out any advantage and we were soon back racing, and hiding away from the screen when Lewis and Russell thought it would be a fun idea to take Maggots and Beckett side by side. Unfortunately, this is where the return of the yo-yo reared its head, and being honest, when you're just able to cruise back past in a straight line, this is the first time I actively believe this new racing is shit. Hamilton was only able to make it by when Russell was diagnosed with a slow puncture on the rear, the Mercedes man risking an extra lap before coming in, deciding that gooning in Max Verstappen's cornflakes was way more important than his physical health and well-being. The Dutchman's day would get even worse when Hamilton made it by and onto the podium. Meanwhile, then Lance Stroll land, he'd just been given a penalty for exceeding track limits, celebrating by exceeding them again. Maybe he thought the Lego rules applied, who knows. The lead fight, meanwhile, was looking to be going the way of Kimi Antonelli, the Italian with a tyre advantage as he hunted down Leclerc for the win, only to have his Mercedes start stripping for the Silverstone crowd with 10 laps to go. 2 pit stops later and all hope looked lost for the championship leader, and that looked to be the end of this one, until Max Verstappen was spotted out at Stowe, and with a Lando stand in front of you, I don't think he's getting a lot of sympathy on that one. I believe the direct quote from Max was, "F this car, unbelievable, f this." Don't know about you, but I don't think he's very happy. That incident brought up the safety car with limited laps to go in this one, history dictating we would do a 1-lap shootout to the line, which we got, before the FIA took it away from us again for apparently no reason whatsoever. I swear to God, if I see a Leclerc-branded umbrella on the track, I'm gonna f***ing kill someone. Charles Leclerc then came across the line to take his first victory since 2024. Russell and Hamilton completing the podium in a race that was essentially the reverse of Abu Dhabi 2021. But hashtag Blair still lost out, having boxed under yellow, and thus people were pissed again. The poor FIA just can't win, can they? Come to think of it, we really have gone back 5 years, even the TV's spinning things on the sidelines. Antonelli would recover in the points, only to have those stripped away with a penalty for track limit, which feels slightly unfair given half his car was falling off, but well, there was no mitigating circumstances for the wheelie bins, were there? But it's a real shame to end what was a great race in such controversial circumstances, with everyone forgetting all the great action we got, and instead just praying Mohammed Ben Sulayem was still stuck in the gravel trap when Max did this. Lewis Hamilton's day almost got worse when he was investigated for a yellow flag infringement, but ultimately cleared of any wrongdoing, despite admitting he should get a penalty in the press pen. Twitter won't mention that because, well, they don't understand the meaning of the word positives. Anyway, if you enjoyed the comedy review, leave it a like and get subscribed, as the drama of today brings the championship right back together. I'll be covering the whole second half of the season right here on the channel. Big thank you to the members and patrons as well, who got an early preview to this one, and we'll get the Formula 2 comedy review later this week as well. Links are down below if you'd like to find out more on that. There's no racing next week, so I'll be back with, well, something else. Until then, you know what to do. F*** off. I don't want to talk about it. On the bright side, they're just not yours, are they?
That's rude.
Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to the Comedy Review, the show that self-implodes more than 1945 Japanese. Funny, I seem to remember the Americans having a little something to do with that. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport. Things like this. Aston Martin show off their new Belgian upgrade package. Franco Colapinto asks for it, and a suitcase rolls down Eau Rouge. Don't do it, Will. It's not worth it. Carlos Sainz was also carjacked, but I'm not going to make a joke about that, because unlike some others in this community, I actually appreciate all the marshals out there. Right, what the feckless pricks at Aston Martin done this week? I don't actually have a whole lot to talk about here, I just fancied slandering the Strolls for a bit. Aston have been hard at work picking up their new upgrade package this week, which won't actually be on the car until Hungary, and then we'll still be missing a competent engine that doesn't double as your mum's latest pleasure toy until after the summer break. Instead, the team have been busy testing whatever this is and revealing the Aston Martin Dreadnought for Call of Duty. Basically sounds like anything other than unfucking their situation in Formula 1. Elsewhere in the news, let's talk about Abu Dhabi 2021. The conclusion to the British Grand Prix has pissed off Twitter once again. Turns out even when Formula 1 does follow its own rules, Lewis Hamilton loses out and everyone is a racist piece of shit. What a lovely community we all live in. In case you need reminding, though I'm assuming Twitter's done that for you already, the British Grand Prix ended in rather controversial circumstances when Red Bull's latest attempt to encourage Max Verstappen to a sabbatical saw a late safety car come out. In F1's biggest cock tease of the century, the FIA told us this was coming in, only to realise this wasn't allowed as lap cars hadn't been given ample time to do, well, let's be honest, what the f*** do they do with one lap to go? A safety car coming in message was thus accidentally displayed on every live TV screen in the country before being rescinded again, cue everyone losing their minds despite this being done right. Jesus, Big Ben just can't win, can he? Still, could be worse. You could be Carlos Sainz, whose Williams car was so shit he thought he was one lap down, illegally overtook the safety car and was handed the 1 lap penalty, because apparently that's a thing now. The Silverstone round also did little to alleviate tensions in the Verstappen camp, the Dutchman now mathematically unable to enter the summer break in the top 2 in the standings and thus qualifying for his exit clause at the end of the season. That handed an impossible task to the Red Bull PR team, who had to try and tell Max what to say when the Belgian media day rolled around, as rumours continued to swirl about a bombshell move to McLaren, and oh look, he's signed one of their juniors to his endurance team. I actually cover that, plus what it means for poor Oscar Piastri here in my next video, which members and patrons can watch right now. Alright, plugs over, I'll f*** off again. In some more quickfire news, Red Bull has scrapped the Macarena wing, Autosport are asking stupid questions, and F1's energy crisis means Belgium's likely to be shit. Right, let's find out if it really is then. Grid penalties were the order of the day on Friday. Lando Norris and Isaac Hadjar with hefty drops to the rear of the field. The Astons were set to join them, but I don't think that will affect their position very much. In better news for Red Bull, Max Verstappen was looking better out there, topping FP1 with the fastest time on Friday morning, yet still finding time to discriminate about his downshifts. Does he even know what a good shift feels like at this point? Ferrari were also looking impressive, despite this moment on the gravel for Charles Leclerc. As long as no one replicates those lines though, I'm sure we'll all be fine. Now what does that sound a little bit like foreshadowing? Oscar Piastri was another interested in the Scuderia's racing lines, even to the point where he fancied setting up a little picnic at the end of the Kemmel Straight to see how it was really done. That turned out to actually be a hydraulic issue, was enough to give Piastri an additional 20 minutes of playtime before the Australian could take part in FP2, teammate Lando Norris jealous of all the attention and threatening to throw his McLaren into the wall. Pierre Gasly would then go one better before the end of the session, testing this new version of the Macarena wing, where you get what we call super straight line mode as it hurtles into the path of oncoming traffic. That was bad news for Alpine, who are in close competition with VCarb this weekend, bringing a new upgrade to their airbox, which was apparently designed in Minecraft. Only Arvid Lindblad would be getting that for this weekend, and as Liam Lawson proceeded to prove why, Carlos Sainz was complaining about dangerous traffic, which we'd all have more sympathy for if he wasn't doing it himself back in FP1. The man he impeded back then was actually the one topping Friday afternoon's running, Kimi Antonelli flexing Mercedes' muscles as FP2 came to a close and we geared up for Saturday qualifying. Before that, we have FP3, Kimi once again on top here, begging the question, what exactly was George Russell playing at? The Briton had been 8th on Friday, was only able to get himself as high as the top 4 as Saturday morning came along, complaining about a lack of talent, power on the Spa-Francorchamps straights. Elsewhere, Sergio Perez got excited when he saw the opportunity to pass a Red Bull when Hadjar stalled at the end of the pit lane. He was wheeled to the pits and eventually got back out, only to be given a crash course by Stroll on what life will be like for him after his grid penalty on Sunday. Gasly was also back out following his shunt the day before, Alpine trying to spin this crash as they intended to swap the engine out anyway, so Pierre was simply doing that disassembly bit for them. That excuse wouldn't quite work when Lewis Hamilton was seen making the exact same mistake at the end of the session, ripping the rear corner off his Ferrari and putting his qualifying participation into question. You know what's certain though? The IQ of this week's ex-Bellend of the Week. So, Lewis's accident was enough to bring the Max Verstappen fans out of the woodwork, Verstappen fans who have been strangely quiet after the British Grand Prix for some reason. If this was Max Verstappen, Lewis fans would have declared it as driver error, but the case is opposite here. Okay, no objections so far. Ban Macarena wing, it's dangerous. Right, this ex-Bellend of the Week appears to be brought to you by Specsavers. You see, careful analysis of the footage will reveal that all this takes place on, hang on, let me just check. Oh yeah, a corner, where the Macarena wing isn't in effect. The only thing upside down was Zayn here when he was dropped on his head as a child. Tell me you know nothing about F1 without telling me you know nothing about F1. Even Gasly is flabbergasted by this tweet. Sometimes the brain functions in mysterious ways for some people. The wing is closed, you fucking wally. Big thank you to Matthew for raising this guy to my attention, and if you'd like to nominate the next ex-Bellend of the Week, use the hashtag on screen, tag me on the platform, or join the Discord server. Now, finally, on to qualifying. Oh look, it's champagne. Thank God, I thought Formula Regional had just introduced a cock cam. Esteban Ocon is wearing a Spider-Man themed helmet for this weekend, but performed like Supergirl when Q1 rolled around. Alex Albon was the other casualty alongside the usual cast of the Cadillacs and Astons, who were now 5 seconds off the pace. You know what, maybe that tractor is quicker after all, or even that suitcase, who knows. The remaining 16 were progressing to Q2, the top 4 teams safe as Lindblad took the Minecraft car to a staggering P6. The final spot in the top 10 shootout was between teammate Lawson and the Audi of Bortoletto, the Kiwi losing out, and I think that might just be his punishment. Some late drama in this one, as the other Audi of Nico Hulkenberg was then spotted doing what he's done best in 2026, a hydraulics failure leaving him on the sidelines for the remainder of the day. Fortunately, he was out anyway. Importantly for Red Bull though, Isaac Hadjar was through, and with a looming penalty for Sunday, could be transformed into the perfect Verstappen slave as we got into the final runs for Q3. That worked almost too well, as at the end of the lap, Max got so close he could almost measure the volume of diarrhea coming out of the Frenchman's arse. Things still coming good as the Dutchman rocketed to the top, only to be instantly replaced by Antonelli a few moments later. The other Mercedes of Russell could only do enough for 4th, which will end up being 3rd after Lando Norris's grid penalty. Fact of the matter is, things could have got a whole lot worse. Leclerc up on his lap, only to be confused by a fake yellow flag and back off out of the final corner. Suppose that's the second time he's lost out like that in 2026. I can't think of anything else notable in qualifying, so we can move straight on to the Oh, hang on, no, there was a red flag for some gravel. Well, shit. Sunday brought with it 2 new discoveries. Firstly, Lance Stroll had qualified so far back, his penalty had actually moved him up 2 spots. And secondly, Sky Sports viewing figures must have been down, as despite the sun shining bright in the sky, they wouldn't shut up about the rain again. In fact, it got so bad, Oscar Piastri was even allegedly reporting moisture down at turn 1 on the formation lap. And as all those with functioning eyes quickly diagnosed this as bollocks, it was lights out, and everyone making it through turn 1. You know what, where's Romain Grosjean when you need him? Action wasn't too far away, however, Verstappen passing leader Antonelli on the run-up to Eau Rouge. That was it for his energy store though. The Dutchman promptly swamped for the Mercedes and the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. Slightly further back, George Russell had been experiencing a similar start and took inspiration from those ahead to try and go around the outside of Les Combes. Issue was, the guy he was passing happened to be called Lewis Hamilton. Now I'd like to briefly draw your attention to Saturday's sprint race in Formula 3, a similar crash also involving two championship contenders, and also on lap 1 receiving no further action from race control. So, as I'm sure you'll appreciate then, to remain consistent, here's a 5-second penalty for Lewis Hamilton. As for George, well, he was out of this one, but at least Mercedes claim to have fixed the engine issues affecting him this weekend.
I'm out. What the fuck happened with the sock down the straight? Had no fucking battery down the straight. Unfucking acceptable.
Oh, maybe not then. Us Britons were clearly in quite a terrorist-inducing mood on the opening tour of this one. Ollie Behrman not impressed with SD Bestie's newfound confidence and sending his teammate straight into the gravel trap. Honestly, I'm just surprised Colapinto got through this one unscathed. That brought out the safety car, as we all discovered Sainz had been bullying the French as well. We get going again on lap 5. Antonelli leading from Leclerc and Hamilton squabbling with Oscar Piastri, before realising using all your laps energy deployment down at turn 1 might not have been the most sensible idea. One lap later, Verstappen had reclaimed P2 and Piastri was now lining Leclerc up for a move. The Monegasque's singular brain cell working overtime as it took the Hamilton approach of just driving into your opponent to remain in front. Piastri would live to fight another day, meanwhile teammate Lando Norris was cutting his way through the field on the harder compound of tyre. With his teammate limping with damage up the road, one would think McLaren would just command their pair to swap positions, which admittedly Oscar did, before realising he was never told he had to stay there. Meanwhile, when Sergio Perez lands, the Mexican has pitted 3 times in 16 laps and is now out of the running. We were into the pit stop phases by this point, which were made doubly exciting by the FIA throwing out random virtual safety cars for little to no reason at all. Not that Ferrari were complaining, they'd just timed one to perfection to give both cars a significant advantage, until this engineer fancied giving Lewis Hamilton a hug on the way out. Hamilton then came over the radio asking if they'd made the correct front wing adjustments, being told there wasn't time, or to translate, we were going to, but then you ran the poor f***er over. So an engineer may be dead, but on the bright side, Charles Leclerc is out in the lead, and looking like he has a real chance to make this 2 wins on the bounce in 2026. That was further helped by Lando Norris doing his best to identify as a chicane, holding up Antonelli until lap 26, and allowing Charles to build a lovely 3-second buffer at the front. Nozzo would eventually box from the hards on lap 31, McLaren so impressed with his charge through the field, they clearly wanted to see him do it all over again. A slow rear left, putting the world champion all the way back to behind Porta f***ing Leto. Meanwhile, here's a great overtake from earlier, Colapinto getting a double overtake, which you may not have seen given F1 put it in one of those tiny little boxes. So here I am, putting it in one of those tiny little boxes. That's because all the focus was on the charge at the front, Antonelli slowly whittling down the gap to Leclerc, and with 10 tours to go, regaining that P1. All hope's not lost though, Charles Leclerc has just been given a new engine mode. Nope, hang on, it appears to have made him slower. We're actually going to add one to the glue factory count here, as the team then had the gall to come over Hamilton's radio and declare that he was catching Verstappen by a few tenths a lap. So there was a chance. For context, we had 1 lap to go, and the gap was 4 fucking seconds. Kimi Antonelli came across the line then to take another win in 2026 and reassert his dominance at the top of the Drivers' Championship. Shout out to Lindblad and Bortoletto as well for pulling some points out of this one. Sky were very keen for you to get that message, presumably to make you all forget about that so-called rain they were predicting earlier. As far as I see it then, that was a pretty decent Grand Prix. Granted, I watched it in a pub, pumping myself full of alcohol and having the benefit of Lewis Hamilton's radio being on mute, so you know what, maybe it's just better you let me know what you thought down in the comments below. I've left those celebrations to make this video, so if you enjoyed it, a like and sub to the channel would really help me out as we slowly get closer to 200k. I feel like I've been saying that for a while at this point, but let's see if we can just do it before the end of the season. Members and patrons, meanwhile, got a preview to this video early, and as I mentioned before, have that Piastri one in early access too, plus the exclusive Formula 2 comedy review, and I think that's more than enough reasons to warrant you checking it out using the links below. Anyway, I'll be back with something else. Until then, you know the drill. F*** off. So VCar have just posted this. He got the dog in him. You know, I'm really glad they did that this year. That whole joke with Yuki Tsunoda would have had a whole different connotation.
That's rude.
Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to the Comedy Review, the show that has a host about as strong as Lando's title defense this year. Right, I'll have you know I benched 100 kilos the other day, so in other words, get to fuck. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport, things like this. Lewis Hamilton fists some concrete, the paddock goes into hiding as Colton Herta prepares for FP1, and Esteban Ocon meets the Avengers, just further proof his career is on life support. Plenty to get through then, but where better to start than the spell of Aston watch. This is a big weekend for the Aston Martin team, their long-awaited B-Spec car finally making its first appearance, and morale at a year high. That said, let's not forget what came out of their mouth at the start of the season.
And when you see the car we're going to present on track this coming week with Adrian's new, very exciting vision, I think everybody will understand.
Yeah, that's not aged well, has it, mate? New and improved on the AMR 26 includes modifications to the beam wing, rear brake duct, front brake duct, side pod inlet, engine cover, cooling louvers, front wing end plate, front wing, floor fences, floor edge, floor body, rear suspension, diffuser, rear wing end plate, and nose. Yeah, we all have a good nose job, don't we? Spares are at a minimum then. I mean, just listen to Adrian Newey here.
Very short on parts, so it's being careful with it.
Let's just hope the drivers listen to that. So the Hungara ring just got new corner names, and some, well, they're better than others. We'll start off with the good ones. Several bends named after famous drivers. Piquet, Hamilton, Mansell, Alesi and Schumacher are all getting credit, with Turn 13 honouring Ayrton Senna after the ages of several of his alleged girlfriends. Turn 3 is called Spring, named after the valley of Tree Springs where the circuit resides. That sounds lovely, until you remember this is the exact same place Felipe Massa was hit by a spring that nearly killed the poor guy. Turn 5 is named after the nearby village Mogyorod, yeah, sorry for the pronunciation on that one, with the subsequent 6-7 chicane titled Driving Centre, which is named after a driving centre. 8 and 9 are called Buda and Pest. Those are the names of the two separate cities that eventually joined to become the Budapest we all know and love today. Yeah, you weren't expecting to actually learn something from this video, were you? The Danube River that splits the pair has its own corner too, leaving us with just the final turn 14, named yeah, that. Finally, in our news segment this week, some great news. We might not be going to Qatar anymore. That little disagreement in the Middle East has raised its head once again. That's put the end of this year's F1 calendar in jeopardy. Teams, unsurprisingly, not too keen about factoring in missile strikes into their race strategy. Yeah, I can't think why on that one. The big difference between this and the earlier cancellations at the start of the season is that now the calendar risks falling under 21 races, and that means F1 could breach its TV contracts, and the big bosses could lose lots of money. Come on, you didn't think they actually cared, did you? Some surprising candidates have reared their head then about the possibility of hosting a race at the end of the season. Malaysia said to be very close to a deal that would see F1 return to Sepang for the first time since Lance Stroll failed to complete the cooldown lap. Turkey and Imola are also potentially on the cards. The FIA were keen to get down to Istanbul to inspect the circuit there. That's a convenient excuse, isn't it? All the talk in FP1 was about Aston's new upgrade, only for the wheels to fall off early doors. No, seriously, look at Lance Stroll.
Very short on parts, so it's being careful with it.
A rear suspension failure, which apparently was not due to the upgrade, sure we'll all believe that one, struck the Canadian on the exit of Turn 2. On the bright side, keeping this out of the wall might just be the most impressive performance he's ever put on. At the other end of the order, things were looking up for Ferrari and Lewis Hamilton, the Briton taking a new approach this weekend, learning from Max Verstappen and spending all of the opening practice racially abusing his upshifts for some reason. At least he had some, which was better than his teammate Charles Leclerc, who despite topping the session was clearly a little conscious about stepping on the weighbridge, and yeah, I can kind of understand that one. Any hope of escaping the glue factory also looked off the cards for the Monegasque, as Leo Leclerc was spotted cock-blocking his dad from a future Red Bull move. Also, my dog's taking a piss, so let's take a photo of it. Speaking of the energy drinks brands, they could at least marvel in the solace that Max Verstappen was in P2, though had an adventurous session of his own, encountering old sparring partner Carlos Sainz, who had put James Vowles on mute and thus had no idea the Dutchman was coming. The Spaniard spent the rest of the session making sure he was well and truly out of everyone else's way. As we geared up for FP2, Ferrari continued to assert their dominance at the top of the times, and Colapinto continued to assert his dominance on the tyre barriers. The Argentinian opted for an even higher downforce setup with this rear wing adjustment, and if you're looking for sympathy, well, following the World Cup, you're going to struggle to find any from me. In fact, things would get even better for the British, as Lewis Hamilton was now on top at the end of Friday. The 7-time champion's handprints, now immortalised in the runoff at his very own corner, I'm not quite sure they'll be able to do that for everyone though. FP1 has seen a handful of rookies take over the field, and that meant several others were now on the back foot in the second practice session. Kimi Antonelli having to be reminded what way the circuit went. Meanwhile, over in the land of make-believe, the damage on Lance Stroll's car from the morning was enough to knock him out of the afternoon's proceedings. The Canadian forced to spend the hour chatting to Adrian Newey from Temu instead. The Silverstone-based team was still rather excited about their new package, maybe too excited looking at this footage. Perhaps the idea was, if we look like Kick Sauber, people will just forgive us for being shit. Both cars will be back out for FP3, but that almost lasted no time at all when Alonso met Stroll at full racing speed in the final sector.
Very short on parts, so it's being careful with this.
Still, could be worse. You could be Cadillac, who were late out with Sergio Perez, the Mexican managing a whopping one corner before the rear of his car burst into flames. Brake issues are less of a surprise for these guys at this point. What we definitely didn't expect, though, was the first FP3 of the year that wasn't topped by a silver arrow. Lando Norris and McLaren instead taking the spoils and setting up a tantalising qualifying for Saturday afternoon. Before that, though, it's time for our ex-bell end of the week. Now, there's been plenty to talk about in F1 recently, so let's go back to 2021 again. As images of the infamous Hamilton-Verstappen-Silverstone collision started redoing the rounds, let's see what this actual pussy thinks on the matter. I hope Max one day puts Hamilton on his head and ends his career, lol. Would be fun to break his entire fan base, lol. Only some accounts can reply. Damn, I wonder why that might be. Are you wishing death on someone because it would be funny? F***ing hell, you need to seek help. Are you alright? Cry harder. He tried first chance he got at Monza 3 races later, fella. Thanks to these two for bringing this one to my attention, and if you'd like to nominate the next ex-bell end of the week, use the hashtag on screen, tag me on the platform, or join the Discord server. Now, time for qualifying. Oh look, child abuse. Q1 would actually be interesting this time around, as with the Aston upgrades, there were now 4 spots in the first drop zone to fill. With Cadillac reunited with the back row of the grid, the question was who would be joining them. That was soon revealed to be the Williams pair when Carlos Sainz's personal best lap only put him 16th with a minute still left to run. The Spaniard was soon shuffled back as Ollie Behrman became a surprise early casualty, those eliminated being propped up by a lone Aston Martin of Lance Stroll. The Canadian, exposed as teammate Fernando Alonso made it through for the first time in 2026. I get that's not new news, but what can you do? There was a momentary point of complete hopium when Fernando was spotted to tie up as 9th at one stage in Q2, though that was rather helped by Isaac Hadjar identifying as a fidget spinner and the rest of the timing tower looking a little something like this. When everyone did pull their finger out their arse, Alonso was back down in P16, but only 1/10 away from the Haas of Esteban Ocon. I don't know if that's props to Aston Martin or just further proof that Ocon is shit. Bortoletto was also out, though Audi teammate Hulkenberg managed to break through into the top 10. And with one of the screamers making it, that meant one of our Q3 regulars was in a lot of trouble. For a second, that individual looked to be Charles Leclerc, but the Monegasque escaped embarrassment and instead sent Liam Lawson to join the Alpines in making up the drop zone. Onto the top 10 shootout then, 3 teams vying for pole. Thing was, Mercedes weren't any of them. Norris and Piastri set the early pace, though the McLaren's laxative-ridden rear end suggested there was more time to be found. Enter Lewis Hamilton then, who took his Ferrari to provisional pole at the end of the first half of the session. With Antonelli only P4, did that open up an opportunity for George Russell? Well, I'll answer that one for you. No. There was still one set of runs to go though, however the track didn't appear to be improving. And even if it was, I'm not quite sure that's the best way of going about the final corner. With the fastest Red Bull now being their PR team getting Max through his TV interviews, Kimi Antonelli found his lap compromised by the yellow flags, the Italian deciding f*** it and going quicker anyway, getting 3 positions in return. Problem was, that was in the form of a grid penalty. With Russell scuppered as well and probably rage quitting down at the first corner, all looked good for Lewis Hamilton. So confident he'd already parked up in front of the number 1 in Parc Fermé, handing him the perfect view of Lando Norris appearing out of the Shadow Realm to just go even quicker. Lewis's day would then get worse when he was given the slam dunk penalty for impeding Piastri. You know what, it's a shame we've already had our ex-bell under the week, as the subsequent nominations was something else. Race day would open with the official news that Malaysia would host the Bahrain Grand Prix. No, you've not just had a stroke. In what I'm convinced has just been done to make David Croft kill himself live on air, this has been called the Formula 1 Gulf Air Bahrain Grand Prix in Malaysia. Really rolls off the tongue, that one, doesn't it? The whole thing just opens a whole can of worms, doesn't it? I mean, what's next? The North Korean Missile Test Grand Prix hosted in South Korea, or the British Grand Prix hosted at the Falkland Islands. Actually, I quite like that one. Still, I guess it beats the risk of having a red flag track invasion when locals storm the grid trying to stone a grid girl for showing some ankle. So with any chance of me being invited to the Gulf Air Bahrain Grand Prix in Malaysia out of the window, we were gearing up for 5 red lights in Hungary, Lando Norris getting off the line, and George Russell Well, not. The Mercedes had a brand new power unit after Saturday, but Toto Wolff pressed the nuclear button to ensure Kimi Antonelli remained ahead. Sorry, I think I've just been reading Twitter too much again. Meanwhile, at the front, Piastri had also got a mega start and was challenging his teammate for the lead, which suddenly became a lot easier when it really did become 2025 again, and Norris bottled turn 2 to throw it all away. And yes, I'm calling it turn 2. If I said Norris bottled Hamilton, it sounds a bit too much like a hate crime. As the McLaren started to drive into the distance, Hamilton and Verstappen had got their annual bit of contact out of the way and were busy squabbling over third. That gave us 14 laps of waiting for something to happen, and when it didn't, the Ferrari was in to attempt the undercut. In a very un-Ferrari way, this actually worked. Hamilton quick to restore order by immediately losing the position a couple of tours later. As Valtteri Bottas crashed into the pits, Isaac Hadjar revealed he'd become Formula One's new excitement ambassador, sacrificing his race to allow the leaders to bunch up and hopefully give me something to talk about. Hamilton wasn't allowed into this party, however, not check social media, but assuming that means Isaac's now a massive racist. Lewis was rather put out when Ferrari revealed they'd used up all of their strategic prowess and pitted him behind the Frenchman for a second time. What was far more interesting, however, was the battle brewing between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris for the lead, or as it turned out, the battle between Lando Norris and the Phantom Bottle for the lead. The Briton was clearly the quicker driver, and if you're wondering how I know that, it's because he wouldn't shut the f*** up about it. We were back talking about papaya rules then, which meant Oscar got priority on the stops, pitting first as Nosser opted to hang on to the lead for a little while longer. It was at this point though where we realised he may well have been much quicker after all, pulling off what looked to be the almighty overcut, which was then helped by old buddy Carlos Sainz being a terrorist while getting lapped by Piastri. When Lando emerged in the lead, it was then Oscar's turn to be a whiny bitch over the radio, McLaren soon getting bored of this and just turning his gearbox off. All Norris had to do then was pass the one stopping Antonelli, which was about as easy as taking candy from a baby, or triggering a McLaren fan.
I will fucking find you, and I will kill you.
The Italian's day would then get worse when he was boxed off his strategy anyway, just before the VSC for Piastri-stricken McLaren came out and neutralised any advantage he would have had. On the plus side, Lewis Hamilton was the first car ahead, and the stewards had just remembered he hadn't been given a penalty in the last 24 hours. Speeding in the pit lane was the offence this time round, knocking him off the podium and riling up yet another fan base this afternoon. All the while, Lando Norris was running away with it out there. In one of the best drives of his career, the reigning champion was untouchable. And you know that's true because I'm the one saying it. Verstappen would drag that slag of a Red Bull into second and still managed to complain about it, with Antonelli completing the podium and strengthening his championship ambitions in what was Mercedes' worst race of the year. Not terrible going, that, is it? Some shout-outs further down the field, Nico Hülkenberg getting his first points of the season for Audi, and Aston Martin getting both cars into the top 15. The fact we're calling that a win is slightly depressing, but it's miles better than anything else we've seen from them this season. An alright race then, and I just want to say a big thank you for everyone who joined into the live race watch-along we did for this one. Even the guy who tried to cancel me of having an AI voice read out anti-Semitic jokes at one point. Actually no, f*** that guy. That was good fun though, and we'll probably do it again later on in the year. So if you enjoyed the comedy review, drop it a like, get subscribed, and keep an eye out for more of these in the future. Big thank you to the members and patrons as well, who got an early access preview to this video, plus received the Formula 2 comedy review. Links down below if you'd like to find out more on that one. Anyway, video's over now, so you lot can f*** off.